You can't even imagine how bad it is, and it's blatant.
It,
It's out there.
well,
But advertising, my God.
Absolutely, Andrew. Yeah, if I can just interject there a minute without interrupting you, because I don't want to do that. I just want to talk about corruption a minute, because in the course of what I do every day, I see corruption oozing out of every orifice, as it were, if I can put it like that. There's not a single inch of our planet that isn't affected by the blight of corruption. It's a stain on lives. It's a stain on minds. It's an indication of the way that humanity has gone. He is prepared to go beyond selling its soul. Well, there's a hell of a lot of people that are only too happy to be able to worship every single last bit of profit that they can do in order to collapse billions of lives in a heartbeat without a single blink of the eye. We have to honestly say that until there is a definitive grip on corruption. Now, that's quite a sentence, isn't it? A definitive grip on corruption. I know that it can be achieved. And the way that it's achieved, I believe myself, I think it can be achieved by actually cleansing systems of the so-called corruption in the first place. But it has to actually come within the integral mechanisms that make up every single part of our systems as a whole. Because
well,
not bad though. Stuff. Quite a good stretch, that one. I'm looking forward to when Robert has his new internet provider. That's going to be a good one.
He sounds much louder and clearer.
It's not on. He hasn't got it yet. He's still on the old one.
No, he's still.
He's going to get the new one in.
Whoopee.
When are you getting the new one, Robert? When are you getting the new one?
Do you know what, Oliver? I'll be glad when I tell you what, Oliver. If I get this broadband connection sorted out, one of the most useful things. There we go.
December, is it? Did you say December earlier?
It will be earlier. With a bit of luck, I should be sorting out a better connection in October, so I can hope to be able to stay here in this meeting without constantly being affected by everyone else except myself. It's the more
you mention you're getting a new internet provider, the more hopeful we'll be of a better signal in the meantime from the old one.
Well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, this is the question of questions, isn't it? Does Rob's old internet stand up to scrutiny on his new provider? Yes. Pasting answers on a postcard, please. Not to exceed 50,000 units through my letterbox. I know.
Very good.
Yeah. I shall be. Yeah, sorry, Oliver. I shall be quiet my warbling in a minute because I've noticed Jim's got his hand up, and I know I've had the floor.
Thought about using subsidies to pay advertisers. They'll do whatever you tell them to do. Advertisers, you put the script in front of them, and you say, "Do that. Here's 50 grand or whatever." They'll do it, and they'll do it really well. That would make such a huge difference. But now we have to get the subsidies off. We have to get the subsidies off government.
Absolutely. I tell you something. It will be a definitive. Having subsidies like that put across to the advertising agencies across our planet will be a definitive moment in the turning point. I believe in the way that advertising agencies conduct themselves across our planet. Because at the moment they are living in a fantasy world that is part of the problem and not the solution.
Free lunches basically all around for the oil industry. I mean, it's not acceptable.
Yeah,
it's not acceptable.
Yeah.
My own theory is that you split up production from refining from retail. If you can split them up somehow, then you've got them on the run. But that's just my own feeling. I don't know.
No, you're quite right about that. To have them on their toes and on the run is a definitive new chapter in the ability to be able to gain ground in the ways that need to be put across in a global manner. On that note, I think I might even stand out and be quiet. So I'll let the other hands speak while I've still got a connection. So thanks, Alex, for being able to let me speak again. Thank you, Alex.
Of course. And I'm actually rather used to your presentation in tech. I'll probably we can't win in this life when you get the new system. I probably won't like it because I'm so used to the old system here.
Yeah, I think what will happen, Alex, if you be able to hear me all the time and I even become a regular co-host on here, you'll think, Jesus, I wish this guy would go away. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it could
Um,
be a state of that. It could
yeah,
be.
it's part of hosting to just kind of do this rhythm with Robert. He disappears. I cover till he comes back. I'm
Yeah.
well used to this.
Yeah, I tell you something though, Alex. Just before I be quiet and let the hand speak, I will say that if my presence in this space ever gets too annoying, you can just tell me to buzz off anytime. All right.
Yeah, it's pretty much true of everybody.
Yeah.
The Greek taverna, you run a restaurant by the water and you're not doing it to make huge profits. It's just a life. It's what you do.
It's so true, isn't it? Actually,
We
yeah.
have that same, the cousinship, the Anglo-white guy cousinship, even with
Yeah.
the different cultures here. We have that same sense that it is Jim's turn to talk, that sort of nagging sense that it's been too
Yeah.
long. And then going south behind him. It's certainly a cultural, it might be hardwired genetic. It's a cultural sense of politeness that we share.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know
Anyway,
that,
I'll put my speaker on. I was put my speaker blank on there. So thanks again, Alex. Okay.
anytime, of course. And certainly in my book, I'll tell the story again about Vanessa Nakate, how Robert and I were in a space with her, and she profusely for something he tweeted out in 2019. That
Oh,
of
I
course,
do remember that. Yeah.
you do remember it, but I think you were rather taken aback that you were such a big influence on her climate activist career.
What she said, I was quite flattered by that. I'll just get those few words in. That quite touched me, actually. It's nice to think that I do have influence over people in a positive in a positive way like that.
Yeah, you might have been flattered. I was absolutely stunned and bowled over. She is one of the top 3 climate activists in the world.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Just terrific, of course, just terrific. And Robert, of course, has been on me personally. There are always people on our climate ladder that are inspirational, and if we have disagreements or arguments with those people, such as Leon Simons or Elliot Jacobson, that doesn't mean that they haven't been very inspirational to others. So we always have to respect all this in the climate land. And yeah, let's get to Jim, who has never failed us with a bad point yet. Hi, Jim.
Hey, yeah, listening to the discussion of the tourism and et cetera. What one thought that occurred to me was this documentary filmmaker John D. Liu, who's done great documentaries about restoring the environment, and he has launched, I think it's a worldwide initiative of nature restoration camps, and I don't know a whole lot about them, but they're like temporary to go in and take action to do some nature restoration in areas. But I wonder if there's any kind of tie-in, such an idea of temporary nature restoration camps and tourism, something that's more on the ground and taking action than ecotourism and going to Costa Rica, et cetera, but actually working on the ground. And so I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with this, but one thing that kind of bordered on that, several years ago, a family member of mine was working on a biodynamic organic farm in upstate New York, and I took a week's vacation and actually worked on the farm as a field hand, doing whatever the farm foreman told me to do, and that was a pretty good vacation. It certainly took me outside of my my conventional world. To be out in the field with a machete. Thanks.
Just to come
Absolutely.
back, there's the system of kibbutz in Israel is very much geared towards that. I haven't done it myself, but my wife did it, funnily enough, when she was young, and she loved it. I will just mention that. I know Israel is a kind of awkward word at the moment, but nonetheless, they do run the kibbutz system, which is in effect the same thing. It can be subject to manipulation and so on, but it's a nice idea that you're building a country bit by bit, and it certainly works. That's for sure.
Why don't we get Oliver to our brother going south over there in Greenland? Emily has signed this club meeting on YouTube, and going south, my guy. What's happening? What's up? How's life? Is it cold?
It's bloody hot. We're up to 15 Celsius up here. I would just like to say that we're now on Climate Crisis Club 95 Part 4. And I finally cracked the audio crap nut. So I won't go into the geeky details, but just say that for the 96, 97, 98, 99, and 100 episode, I will be able to stream for 6 hours straight without any audio glitches to YouTube and Rumble. So that's good. And since I'm speaking, and we passed the Arctic sea ice minimum, which is September every year. I would just like to say that we were a record third lowest for sea ice volume, which is like sort of the physical three-dimensional ice mass in the ocean. And if anyone wants to ask any questions about it, because loads of questions about different agencies and area, extent, volume, blah blah. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
That's great news that the audio and all that's cleared up. I have been trying to get the word out that the meeting is on YouTube, and it's fascinating the idea that now the Arctic sea ice is starting to grow. It's starting to build up that time of year. I'm looking up going south, and interesting. It says that you've been in 9 spaces, including Climate Crisis Club 6. So that's quite a while ago. Climate Crisis Club 6 going south participated with us. So a lot to process, unpack, think about, and so on today after 3 hours. I started my morning with a cup of coffee, listening to Lasu Eugene hold an excellent space on Native American wisdom and spirituality and so forth. And they had a loser named Alex from the UK. And what do? I just toss trolls out immediately. That's my policy. When I get to be host, that's what I do. And if one makes a mistake, you can always recuperate. I am thinking of Linda J. Crane, a good account, good environmental account here on Twitter. And she is much more pro the nation of Israeli in politics than I am. And we had a long, long discussion in writing yesterday for hours yesterday evening on getting on the edge of politeness, on the edge of disrespect, and yet not going there. I've chatted with Linda for a long time. I blocked her for a long time, apparently over the palm oil, which I barely remember when the Climate Crisis Club was discussing palm oil in the spring of 2023. But we maintain the conversation. We have different views on Gaza, Israel, and the conflict there, but we kept it within the realm of respect. And we are still following each other. We are still friendly. It can be done. And I don't know, it's so emotional. If we discuss Native American affairs, if we discuss Palestinians, Kim Heller in Lawsuit Space, I thought gave a really first-rate speech, again, on human rights and dignity, racism and hatred. And her speech really showed to me, yet again, the power of these spaces, what we can do when it goes well, when people are really communicating. We'll only keep going forward as Going South just did say, 96, 97, 99, 100. There's no end in sight. I think if I drop dead, Wilson can just step into my shoes. He's certainly ready to go to keep that island feeling going. And you know what? How are they going to stop us? There are too many of us. They can close down Twitter, shut me or Oliver down. They can shut Robert down, or Kim or Andrea. But we will keep going. I don't see the concept is clear. There's Clubhouse, there's Spottable, there's all sorts of other audio group meetings available, even Zoom and so forth. So the concept is here. We will keep going. They can't stop us. Then if they can't stop us, the next thing they try to do is absorb us. Okay, when Microsoft offers me $100,000, I'll take the money and retire and let Will show, or Yusuf, or Nick, of course, or Going South, or anyone. Yeah, so far we've done zero funding, zero money, zero GoFundMes or buy a coffees or Patreons. We incorporated. We haven't done anything financial. I'm not sure how they're going to bribe us when Microsoft or Coca-Cola, when it's the Coca-Cola Climate Club. I don't know when we get to that stage. Eugene said to call them when that happened. I don't know if it'll be bribed or not when we get to that stage. In the meantime, it's fascinating. To see, I see Going South in Climate Crisis Club 6, January 7th, 2023. We lasted for 4 hours. We had 58 people. I can't remember how these meetings, we've been doing this for a while. Climate Crisis Club 6. Oliver was there, Going South. Sal, Nick, Stephen Barlow, and Andy there from Alberta, from Calgary, and something Fleeting X. Oh, that's Christian from Tampa. He liked to talk to us when he was working Millennial, sometimes with some good ideas about perception. So we've come a long way, and we have no intention of stopping. I've been looking for our fifth wave. It doesn't seem to be happening. Maybe the waves will just stop. Maybe this is where we've grown to. If I was Joel, I would give a shout out to everyone here. So many great accounts with us. And I'm absolutely delighted to have lost Sue for the second week as a co-host. I can't recommend his spaces and his count enough. Just fascinating stuff from a member of the Lakota Nation. And since the very beginning of the Climate Crisis Club, we have been talking about working with Indigenous people, listening to Indigenous people. that there is no solution whatsoever to any of these environmental crises, poly-crisis issues without the help and support of Indigenous people. That has been one of our original premises. So again, a lawsuit has been inspirational to me personally, insightful, educational, and just clearly a great person with great insight to this life. And I'm not sure if our ganja queen is with us or not, but she's certainly welcome to speak and say some words if she's connected. I am always happy to blab away when there's a chance. And I want to thank all of you for joining us week after week after week. Like Pup has been at least a year every single Saturday with us. It means a lot to me personally. I'm kind of obsessed with this project at 11 o'clock on Saturday to just turn it on and get it going. So many times I have not wanted to. I thought it's pointless. I've dreaded it. And other times I look forward to it. And I've really enjoyed this. I want to provide cheerleading to encourage you all to keep going. That I do believe that this is working, that we are making a difference. I want to provide some entertainment sometimes, to provide some fun. It's fun to be with you guys on Saturday. It's like being a kid and having people over to the house and breaking out games and chatting and taunting the dog and throwing rocks in the river. Throwing a frisbee. It is like that, having a nice meal. And we've got to learn. We've got to keep learning. This learning thing does not stop. You know, there's so much to learn. None of us in our lifetime can learn it all. Yes, Ida, by all means, add some points here. I'd love to hear some more from you. Hi.
Hi. One last request, kindly. Here in Kenya, I'm not putting it down, but here we have less opportunities for youth advocates for environment. So, if anyone here has an opportunity, or maybe more meetings like this, and more conversations about climate change and conservation, maybe you can invite us and share the links on your post.
Got that.
On your pages, so that we will be grateful to. We are so. I saw someone here who were from the same country. I know we will be grateful to join and to learn from you guys who are out there and learning for this. Thank you.
One of the big things, Cassida, about the club is trying to link people up with other people and all ages as well. There's a lot of that going on all the time, so that is absolutely fine. I'm quite certain Alex would book you into the club, because once you're in the DMs, you will be much more. You get greater accessibility to all the different links that get sort of flooded around by us, and they do a lot. So yeah, there'll be many more connections that you can make. Yeah, I was just mentioning that.
Yeah, we do have a DM chat that goes on.
Could I ask something very quick? My Spaces app used to tell me who was speaking, but it seems to have lost that capability. So I often don't know who is speaking, and can't figure out how to determine that. But anyways,
I get that too, Jim. Jim, I think what it is if you lose your connection during a space and you join again, sometimes it doesn't quite link in properly. You can speak and you can hear, but you can't see everybody sometimes. It's a tech issue. Right. It's a typical, Spaces issue, I think.
Yeah. So I just wanted to quickly ask, who was
Ida?
the woman?
That was Ida from Kenya.
And what was the name again?
Ida.
Ida. Okay, thanks.
I was thinking of looking at when Jim joined us, but the stupid website isn't working. Certainly Africa, Eastern Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, is very, very meaningful for global environmentalists and global ecology. The continent of Africa, 1.4 billion people, has contributed 4% of the historic CO2 to the atmosphere, only 4%. In other words, nothing. I mean, in other words, the entire continent of Africa, everyone in history, all the billionaires, all the powerful people, all the poor people, everyone really hasn't created this climate crisis. And we can't get much farther than that discussion. Like the about the same number for South America too, about 3%. That the people of the Southern Hemisphere have not caused this climate crisis. And yet the people who are responsible for the climate crisis from the North, morally, logically, you kind of say they really should solve it. They've created the problem. They really should solve it. But it's not quite so clear cut. A to B. We look at Africa from 1880 to 1914, and you see the European powers just colonizing the entire continent, except for Ethiopia. The entire rest of the continent by 1914 was colonized. We're 100 years later, and that's a great, great effect on today's world, on today's political world. So these questions of reparations, and ecology as well, these environmental poly crises. I think of Eugene this morning, Eugene, who is Chippewa, and we're in this mess all together today. We have to agree to be respectful, responsible, and to all try together to that better future. And I think that point of view is just central. That is what we're doing. In the spring this year, I talked an awful lot to Dr. Matsanga and other Pan-African philosophers, trying to get a feeling for the 4 billion people on the continent, the 56 nations, the 48 sub-Saharan nations. I think there's something like 14 very strong democracies south of the Sahara. And in my mind, for me, it's about the most complicated issue I've come across, trying to comprehend these philosophies. Speaking of complicated, very, very complicated. A beautiful continent, the continent where the human race started, where Homo sapiens sapiens started before heading out to the other continents. So very much our motherland, our mother, everybody in the human race. I think I'd like to hand the microphone to the real ganja queen, who I think has been trying to speak for a while. So feel free, Queen, to add some remarks or say hi or.
Hi, thanks, Alex. It's great
Sure,
to be here.
anytime.
Blessings.
Of course.
I don't know, I know this is kind of a maybe more of an obscure topic for most. It was for me, at least, until I recently learned about it in the last couple years from Paul von Hartmann, who was actually in the room earlier listening. I'm really excited to see that I shared the space with him, and I'm glad he was in here listening. I don't know if he'll ever come up and speak, but he's the author of Cannabis versus Climate Change. And really, he was definitely ahead of his time. This book's been out for, I think, over a decade now, but he really did an incredible job compiling what at the time was available regarding atmospheric terpenes and how important terpenes are to the hydrologic cycle. They are, the boreal forest is that ring around the planet that, is essentially the lungs of the planet. And, since we've destroyed over half the boreal, for timber and paper and industries that we know can with regenerative earth healing plants like cannabis, hemp. But nonetheless, he really lays a solid foundation for how important these terpenes are. And that's should be like the essential focus of any climate healing activities or technologies. And I've noticed lately, since just in the last 5 years, especially on the internet, because I was certainly researching this topic extensively several years ago, and I, was scouring for any research articles I could find on the topic. And I've seen over the last few years just a really incredible increase of research coming out about these terpenes. If you Google now, there's just a lot of stuff out there that has just come out recently. But, supporting what he's saying in his book, now this conversation seems to be coming up more, and I'm seeing something strange in the chemtrail topic space. And you may have your opinions one way or the other on chemtrails. It's been something I've been just kind of fascinated with for a long time, because I literally see them, over my head all the time. And I also live near an airport, so I regular airplanes and whatever these planes are leaving in the sky. And it's definitely coming up a lot now. People are questioning officials, what is the stuff that they're spraying, da 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 da. So I think there's stuff coming out now. Bill Gates, others are building their narrative to what this is. And I think we need to be careful of whatever greenwashing propaganda that they're going to come up with to try to convince us that, I'm just not convinced that spraying heavy metals, which is now what it's coming to light. There's some whistleblowers, government coming out verifying that yes, they are in fact spraying toxic heavy metals, other chemicals into the air as their attempt to, I don't know what they're trying to block the sun or whatever they're but just a reminder, Mother Earth has provided, and for thousands of years was providing the solution to protecting us from the sun, and it was these terpenes. They refract UVB. It's just mind blowing. What there's also patents for terpenes as jet fuel the government has. So I think there's a lot more to this. And I just wanted to see if anyone else was familiar with, the science behind the aerosol terpenes, and if they've been noticing manipulation of narrative when it comes to these chemtrails. Because I think we're going to hear more of that. I think they're going to start telling us that they're spraying terpenes in the air. Like now that the science is showing that. I don't know. There's this over people's heads. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
No, not at all. No.
Not at all.
But what is interesting is the difference between terpenes and heavy chemicals, mostly presumably sulfates, which are used primarily to try and create rainfall. So God knows what's going on with geoengineering at the moment, but certainly the weather's absolutely shot to shit, isn't it? Basically, as we know. Maybe there is a connection. Maybe it's going on the sly and has been for years. Yeah.
Well, I think there are is it Dubai, or there are certain I think there are methods of, creating weather or, creating condensation with this in a safe, environmentally friendly way. That's essentially what the terpenes do. They create cloud condensation nuclei. So I suppose that, weather modification, quote unquote, it's kind of like AI, like, ooh, well, we
Yes,
can use
you're
it
right.
to
Yes,
in good ways
exactly.
or bad
Yes.
ways.
I don't know about the bad ways. I'm not a fan of it myself, purely because I've more mistakes than you can get, benefits from it.
Right.
But I'm not particularly knowledgeable about it. All I do know is that I'm seeing all this weather everywhere, and we know there's more precipitation. I heard from Bonus, one of our people, yesterday, that there's 50 millimeters more on the globe in the last year. I'm trying to get that amount of water worked out. Nobody could do it. I couldn't do it, certainly, but it's an awful lot of extra precipitation. So I guess it's a question of wait and see. I mean, if there's geoengineering going on the sly, then it won't, it's going to get found out sooner or later. And more and more of it, as I say, I don't know how much is even going on legally, but it just sounds very, very risky to me personally. Sounds like you say, like the AI. It can go one way or it can go the other. And at the moment, AI is all over the shop,
Can I just jump in there? Like, so I've lived in Asia for 20 years, right? Singapore has geoengineered its climate, like the whole cloud seeding thing. So
Yeah.
I think sorry, what's your name? The real ganja queen, I love that. Mentioned about the Dubai thing, right? So that was proven beyond doubt that like that wasn't a geoengineering thing. It was, for every degree of warming, there's 7% more moisture in the air, and blah 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 blah. Right? Yes, there is things going on in this field, and we're going to find out about them. But I think there's a I watched people jump onto that geoengineering thing, the cloud setting thing, really quickly. And as someone who's sat in a part of the world that's been doing that for a really long time and knowing the consequences of it, how quickly that became a conspiracy theory, how quickly it became something much bigger than what it actually was. That really sort of was a bit of a sign of the times. Is there something going on? Look, there's so much going on, right? But the science is also saying this is what's going to happen as it gets warmer. There's going to be more of this. So I just want to really encourage everyone to not get on the bandwagon on the cloud seeding thing. It's not as, but look at the amount of rainfall that's hitting the Sahara Desert. That's not cloud seeding. That's just a freaky thing that's going on. So there's more precipitation, as you said, Oliver. But I think the fundamental interference is us spewing more CO2 in the atmosphere. So like I easy to get this sort of stuff, and I don't think it's necessarily a healthy thing to get caught up in.
Let me jump in here real quick. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi, Reverend.
Yeah. So if you're cloud seeding for rain, you use silver iodide. If you're cloud seeding to generate clouds, you use a sulfite, typically a potassium or a sodium sulfite, not a sulfate, a sulfite. Am I a big fan of putting silver iodide in the atmosphere? Not particularly. Sulfites, doesn't bother me a bit. If you want to, now, if you're trying to create clouds and do that through cloud seeding with a sulfite, that's just a waste of time. Ed can talk about the guy down in, Mexico or New Mexico, that by doing good soil management, he now gets rain, and it's a localized improvement in rainfall. But yeah, that's the way I would. I mean, if you want clouds and you're trying to do that, then do it the way the guy is doing it down in, what is it, 25,000 acres at or something like that. He's actually generated and changed his local weather patterns by managing the soil. Anyway, I'll shut up and let Ed jump in on that one because he knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, Ed here, and the guy's name is on. Oh, there's Ed. Hey, Ed.
Ed is amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Ed Burgess. You should come up and share some of your.
Oh yeah,
power.
Ed's been on here 40 times. And
Okay.
yeah, he is amazing.
Come on, Ed, get up there and evangelize for us.
I'm curious to know or hear what he thinks or what anyone thinks too, just about, it's not just moisture, we're also, UVB index is some of the data that, matter that needs to be looked at. And that's, I don't know if just creating precipitation necessarily is gonna really fix that. And Reverend, I think it was you that was speaking, or maybe the gentleman before you, but there's definitely data from, at least out here in California, like Mount Shasta, for example, they're finding a lot more than just the silver nights, the things you mentioned. They're finding barium, they're finding high levels of aluminum. There's a lot of more chemicals that are, for sure getting, like, you compare rainfall from the last 10 years, like there's a definite increase of toxic heavy metals. It could be runoff from something else, but again, I'm trying to find some links that are connected to the chemtrailing, because I'm still not convinced that there's not some shady stuff happening or conspiring of the powers that be.
I'm just pleased with myself, Pop. It's Jonathan Lundgren.
You have to ask yourself the question, why would a government purposefully put toxic chemicals into an aerosol? I mean, this is like chemical warfare that they taught us in the military.
Yeah, just like
why would that expense to do something like that, to try and kill off their population? That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, Pop. We've all
But
been.
that's what they've been doing.
We've all been conditioned to
medicine.
accept pollution everywhere from the Industrial Revolution. Whether they're polluting the air, polluting rivers, pouring gasoline on the street, we accept all this toxic pollution. When you look at Superfund sites, that lake up there in Wyoming that's left over from the copper mining that the ducks landed in and disintegrated. There are over 1,000 Superfund sites. We're all in American society. We're preconditioned to just accept all this toxic stuff, like it's just a matter of course, the price of doing business, and that's the kind of preconditioning to change. It sure sounds like most of the indigenous people, the Native Americans, don't have this issue. They don't believe this crap that all this plastic is going to save us. But certainly for the white Americans, you grow up, and the Europeans, with this idea that this stuff isn't toxic. A little asbestos here, a little lead pipe there, it's all good. That's a major cultural kind of thing we've got to change.
But that is quite a lot of stuff. This is toxic metals being blown in on weather systems. This is not even in the lakes and stuff. This is actually in the air. This is in the clouds, in the sky. This is being rained down on. And particularly, I take with Pup what he's saying. People are a country's greatest asset by a mile, by 100 miles. I mean, it's the people that are the best thing about a country. It's obvious, isn't it? They do stuff. Who better can do stuff than people themselves? It's well known. This I don't need to spout about it, but it just seems a bit sort of odd, really. I find the whole area odd myself. I have to be frank about it.
Yeah, we got to be careful, Oliver, about the people are the best part of a nation. That it's a huge system, right? The people, rivers. You love rivers, lakes.
No,
Yeah.
no. What I mean by the people, I mean the idea of killing your people with various toxic metals.
That's not the right idea. No.
No,
But-
I mean, it's just insane, the whole idea of it, because your people are your country. It's as simple as that. There's no other way of looking at it.
Yeah, I'm not. I've had problems figuring out who my people are. You and Robert seem to be my people. I don't associate with other English American colonials except for maybe Dr. Mike. I don't know any. I don't really have any relatives outside of my sister. I love the Greek people, but I don't have this community thing. I'm not part of any community. My parents weren't either. They just were people. So, on and
Okay,
on.
but if the people were starting to be wiped out by
They are, man. They're the climate crisis is slamming them. They're losing all the trees. Something like 27% of the country is burned up. We have floods
but sure. But if the people started to be knocked out as well at the same time in greater numbers than they are already, then I'm quite sure that you'd be thought of making sure that stopped. Just the same way.
I think it's major motivation for this for me that the Mitsotakis is very far right, and he's screaming about climate change. He's not saying climate change is a hoax. He's telling the EU, save us now, do something.
Yes.
Which to me is a major positivity that this is a thing. A right-wing politician is screaming about the climate crisis in the EU. That's major progress to me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The big oil, big agriculture, big food, big news media, big fashion, big education, big cigarettes. You know, there's one corporate concern after another, big aviation. They're completely out of their minds. They're denying reality. They're not facing facts. One government after another elected by the people is just not facing facts. And here our friend Ed from the great state of Massachusetts is here to explain all this to us and to solve all our problems. Hey Ed, how's it going? I hope it's going well for you.
Yeah, thanks for having me up. I was kind of multitasking and I heard you talking about rain and cloud seeding or something like that, wondering how the water cycles work. Is that what you were wondering?
The ganja queen.
Yeah, Ed, jump in there and talk about that guy down south that has that large farm. He did soil management and changed his local climate. That's what I was referring to.
Okay. That's Alejandro Carrello. It's the Chihuahuan Desert between the United States and Mexico. He's actually in Mexico, though, and sort of in the middle-ish of it. And it's a many-generation ranching. But, you know, all over the world, we know a lot about desertification, where areas that used to be green are now, you know, some form of desert. And even in the southwest of the United States, a lot of that land used to be green. And so many reasons why it desertified. I mean, obviously we know about the Dust Bowl from when they tilled, and of course we know how they lost the bison and they managed the prairies and kept the grasses so they were really flourishing. And so what Alejandro did is, you know, when he used to go to his ranch, he has like 20 acres, and you go along and it's kind of oxidized grass. There's some half dead mesquite bushes. It's pretty desolate. Have been living on it and doing traditional grazing for generations on it, and slowly but surely And of course, from a lot of other climate things that have been affected by many things, it desertified. And so what he learned is what we've learned from basically the bison, that if you manage the animals, keep them tightly packed, and keep them moving so they're not, it's kind of like the people that like mow their lawn every few days to keep it short, stresses it out the lot. Eventually it dies off a lot easier and the roots don't go as deep and it can't hold the water and all that sort of thing. So all was he managed the beef, and now he's actually doing multi-species, and he didn't do any fertilizing except for the cows, and he didn't plant any seeds. He needed some water. He was able to bring some groundwater in to get, it's kind of like priming a pump, the cows are priming the pump. And in 5 years, pretty much turned it from this little scrubby stuff to, you would drive up to the gate of his ranch and the grasses would waist deep. And over 10 years, now it's up to your chest. And he only he only keeps the herd in for a very short period of time, sometimes even less than a day, sometimes a few days, and keeps them moving. And the cow pie is an amazing feat of nature, basically. And if you think about it, it's literally kind of like a pie, and it's got fertilizer, it's got the microbes, and it's got seeds, because as cows graze along and eat the plants, they eat the seeds, and most of those survive going through them and cow pie and drops, and it's a little ecosystem starter. And so when we call that, it's developing hotspots. So it's creating little islands of plant growth and fertilization and moisture. And with the animals tightly packed together, it more tightly packs that work. And it doesn't stress out the plants. That they want to do is graze off a third, trample a third, and about a third of it, the plants will be there. So it creates a little ecosystem too for insects and for moisture, because plants respire. And so, and for and of course, then he's adding the organic matter in the soil, because the most important organic matter is the exudates, which are the sugars that are produced through photosynthesis by the plant, sugar compounds. And it uses a percentage of them for the plant growth above ground, but it shoots anywhere from 30 to 60% of it down the roots to feed the microbes. And so that's how you develop the carbon in the organic matter from them trampling and everything. And that's how you avoid the fire, because I put down in the Purple Pill a wonderful video by Walter Yenny. He's out of Australia. It's called The Big Blue Planet. And it explains how carbon and water cycles work around the earth. And, even Hadley cells, which are the hot air, cold air flow patterns. That's why we're getting heat higher and higher up, because we've desertified around the equator. And so that brings more hot dry air higher up into each of the hemispheres, northern, southern, and that's how we get more droughts and floods up here. So the more we can regreen, reverse the desertification around the equator 10 degrees, the more it's going to benefit everybody. And so now what happens, he's got respiration of his plants. For every percent of organic matter, it holds 25,000 gallons per acre. So if he was started out at maybe 0.5% or something like that, I don't know what he's up to now, but I'll bet you he's at least 3, 4, 5%. So think about how many gallons of water that is. And then of course it respires just like a rainforest. You can almost set your watch about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. it rains. And so, but to make rain, you need one of three things. You either need bacteria, salt, or cold temperature, which creates the ice crystals. Otherwise, raindrops can't form. They've got to form around something. And that bacteria comes in the respiration of the plants and the microbial matter when it's not just desert. And because you create a little damp, and it keeps the surface cool and it keeps that moisture going. It's like on pavement or on like ground that's just dead and no organic matter in it. Rains, none of the water sinks in. In a couple hours, it evaporates off. And so that's how you don't get any rain, because it just doesn't have what we call hydrological cycling happening. And of course, it needs the bacteria to form. That overlaying the most important thing that raindrops form around. It's that bacteria to create actual raindrops and rain. So he's got rain happening. And the other problem in like the United States, for an example, or any of our Europe is the same thing, is we've destroyed the structure in the soil by killing the organisms, either through our farm managing, by tillage and chemicals. And so what happens is the soil have microbes. They build little like different size peas. We call them aggregates. Or think of marbles or peas in a jar. You pour water in, and the water and oxygen, because the microbes need oxygen too, especially the beneficial ones. And they also need actually the nitrogen from the atmosphere to get in down there, because that's how microbes can create the nitrogen that a plant needs. So we don't have to use nitrogen fertilizers anymore. And so what you want to do when it rains is, our joke with farmers is, how much rain did you get yesterday? And our answer is all of it. Because if you've got soil that's compacted with no life building the little aggregates, we often show it as an example. If you make a little pile of flour on a plate and make a little divot in the top and then pour water in that, keep pouring water, it'll fill up and it'll just run over the edge, and you'll dig your finger down a half an inch and it won't be wet because there's no spaces. You need, as Walter says, one thing that's most important in soil is nothing. You need areas of nothing. And so, and that's how you infiltrate the water and get it into the carbon and hold it so that you can get that cycling going. Of course, what we did in the United States is we tilled, and when you till, you burn off, you expose the carbon, the organic matter, and it gets up in the atmosphere. Then it's not stabilized, it's not covered, it's not protected. Water can't infiltrate, and then it just runs off. And of course, it pulls the fertilizer and chemicals with it, and often it's nitrogen fertilizer, and that gets in our rivers and lakes and creates the algae blooms and creates the dead zone. So what we really important in regenerative agriculture is we do cover crops, because we want living plants and living roots in that soil as much of the time of the year, and is with diverse and density as we can. So it keeps feeding those microbes. They keep their little community of aggregates going, which are kind of like their little houses. And then you have water cycling again. So you avoid droughts, you avoid floods. The other issue we have with water, in California is a classic example of it, is you can create heat domes. And that's where you've got a lot of re-radiation of the heat because of pavement with no respiration, because you don't have you get to the little dirt hard pack near the edge of like a parking lot or your paved driveway, and it's hotter, step on the pavement and you burn your feet. And so that's the radiation. We call a heat dome. And so then you've got low pressure, which is high pressure. And then you've got low pressure coming off the ocean. Hot air, heat, and with no moisture. And then you get fire. As Walter will also say, it'll either, plant life will either oxidize and burn, or it has to be eaten. There's two choices. That's the role of ruminants and herbivores and everything to systems back functioning again and get more rain more regularly and less extreme droughts, less extreme flooding. And by doing that, that's how we can and of course, as I said earlier, he did it in 5 years. He got a major change going without doing anything but the animals. In fact, he's been keeping track of the indigenous plant species, because if you think about the American prairie or something, there were hundreds of different species of plant, and which harbor many different species of organisms. And each of those plants, some of them do better in a drought, some of them do better in wetter conditions, and the rest of the time, when it's not their right conditions, they are basically dormant. So even though this desert had been basically pretty dormant for a long time, all of a sudden I've got a list over the 5 years and over the 10 years in the cycle. All of a sudden, we call it plant succession. And all these different plants, from low, early, more like desert plants, up to the middle. Now, he'll never achieve like an old growth forest, because that's what desert-ish or arid, what we call brittle environments, that never happens, because that's just the way it is. But he can get quite a diversity. He can get the many different plants, grasses, forbs, legumes, that sort of thing. And he can certainly get some shrub type plants, and he can get some certain trees over time to eventually rebuild his ecosystem. And that's what regenerative agriculture does, because we steward it, 12 months of the year. We want to get plants on as much of the possible, and we don't want to do monocultures even in season. We want to even have some cover crop, or had a winter cover crop and knock it down. We don't even need to use herbicides. We can just knock it down and then plant into that, or we can plant in a cold environment. We can plant an annual plant after we harvest the crop, and then it'll naturally die out over winter, and then that plant will settle down, or we roll it with what we call a roller crimper, and then we can plant into that mat, and the seeds will come right up through it. And of course, now we're doing companion planting too. So in fact, there's some really great work going on. In other words, you create a multi-grain bread recipe, and you plant those plants to match that recipe. So then you harvest it, and it has the percentages of the different grains that you want to have in that multi-grain. So you don't have to sort the grains. You just harvest them, process them together. And with that we find that the more multi-species we have, the soil organisms do, and the better resilience to pests that those plants have. So I'll leave it there. I'll land it, but that's sort of some Saturday farming talk.
Thanks, Ed. It's funny in my world, listening to Ed's voice is just very reassuring, and learn the knowledge, his insights of a lifetime of farming, working with the soil and the land and the plants. And it gives me great hope listening to Ed too, that we can feed people. We can do this sensibly as well, not this kind of insane mega growth economy racket thing. Flying dozens of private jets around, having dozens of super yachts, and just being kind of crazy. Ed just sounds like the voice of sanity to me. And thank you again, Ed, for speaking. And I know Jim has some really good questions and thoughts.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I have some questions that I'm trying to learn more about, and what one thing I'm trying to learn more about is one of the fundamental principles or practices of regenerative farming is, or regenerative agriculture, is integrating livestock into cropping systems. And here in Texas, our state road systems have FM roads and RM roads. Those are farm to market and ranch to market. We don't have integrated ranch and farm to market roads. So anyways, there is kind of a programmed in understanding that there's ranches and there's farms, and now with regenerative agriculture, we have this new paradigm, at least new to me, is integrating livestock into cropping. And so I take it that that maybe in some common rotations like soy, corn, alfalfa, vetch rotations, that as well as winter rye, cover crops, or whatever, that integrating cattle in there would mean, when you're when it's vetch or alfalfa in one field, or winter rye, you've got the cattle there, but there's a rotation, so so basically the cattle would rotate around. So that's my impression, but I'd like to hear Ed clarify that. But my second question is, okay, if that's kind of the scenario, why not ranch rabbits? They eat all the same stuff. They can digest the cellulose that cattle can digest, and they can fertilize. Why not rabbits? Why not rabbit burgers? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, multi-species grazing, and some situations you can mix the cattle and the sheep and goats and pigs. I mean, all the different, we know pigs, they have that rooting ability. We know chickens will deal with, eating the insects and stuff. So in other words, they can help to control when you've got animals going through, and let's say because there are parasites, there are intestinal worms, like, people know their dogs and people too can get parasite worms and stuff. So that's one way to manage them, is through having chickens going through. So, depending on where your ecosystem is, especially if you're trying to restore it, from being degraded, let's say it was just a field that had been just growing corn or something with a lot of nitrogen and a lot of tillage and stuff for many years. It doesn't have any organic matter in it. You want to restore that. So, and that's how we're going to have more. What we need to do is get the cows out of the feedlot out of the CAFO, which they're just generally finished. All cows and beef graze for the early part of their life, and through the middle and at the end when they fatten them up and bring them in because people want that fat and that tender and that juicy meat. So, and the saturated fat in meat is extremely healthy, as much as they used to think it wasn't. Now we realize it really is. So, and all the farms like in the Midwest and stuff, they all used to be integrated, but over time they became more, as you mentioned, separated, from either grazed or cropped. And so now, and maybe add the 5 principles of soil health, which is what we see in nature all over the world, is number 1 is disturbance, which is over disturbance, which is tillage or the chemicals that kill off of the microbes. You don't see any place in nature where there's tillage. Next one is what we call armor on the soil. So that's when we do our cover crops. You always want a litter on the soil to protect the soil from heat. I mean, if you have bare ground in the summer and you take a little, thermometer gun and shoot it at the soil, you can get 130, 40, even in Massachusetts, I've measured farms around here with 130, 40 degree temperature. Well, the microbes, die off at about 100 degrees, and a lot of the beneficial ones are fairly near the surface. And yet you shoot when it's got cover crops, or that's why you mulch your garden, to keep that surface, and especially just slightly underneath where the microbes are. And, on a hot day, it'll be pretty much similar to the temperature, on a 90-degree day. Sometimes you can living roots in the soil, as I said, as long as period of time as you can, because we used to think that plants competed with each other, but actually with the worst competition is when you have if you have all corn, because each one of those corn stalks is going to need the same nutrients at the same time. So they're in a way competing. If you have a diversity of plants that need different substances at different times, different demands, then they can actually, through the fungal web, the fungi they can share nutrients. They can give it to a plant that needs it, and a plant that doesn't need it as much won't get it. And then the 5th one that we really add in is in integrating insects and livestock. In other words, the critters. We need all the insects, because as Jonathan Lundgren, our entomologist that works with us, says, for every pest, there's 1,700 beneficials. And so, 7,000 individuals, 1,700 beneficials. So why kill 600? We need those. And we want to bring in a lot of the birds for those insects. The more insects we have, the more birds we have. And of course, birds also spread biodiversity of seeds and microbes. So they're all beneficial. And then they keep the insects population in balance. So one of the best things in the Midwest, and that when we are improving soil, they'll do rotations of their crops and their cover crops, because like corn is very demanding of nitrogen, but like soybeans aren't. So you'll do something like a cereal rye. Legume bean plant. What they need is really more carbon. And that's what you get from like a cereal rye. And you can even do it as a monoculture, and instantly you'll see your soil do better and your soybeans do better. But then you've got something like corn that needs a lot more nitrogen. So then you need a little different diversity of cover crops that can help by ingesting and ranching the bacteria in the soil. So that's changed. So we don't have to, if we steward the soil right, all this synthetic nitrogen we're making out of natural gas, we can pretty much eliminate most or not all of that, which is going to be a huge benefit to climate change. And of course, then you're producing organic nitrogen, which is way more stable in the soil. It doesn't just blow off into the atmosphere, because when you apply synthetic nitrogen, it's very inefficient. And of course, that's 300 times. Of course, that's 300 times more powerful than regular CO2. So, and that's something that's hardly ever talked about. So we can make huge advantages in that. So we're raise beef or chickens or sheep or any of that stuff, or how to lamb them or, calve them and all that sort of thing. This is creating a great opportunity for young people, because they can have a barn or something to calve out, or they can have a small amount of acreage to keep the mother herd or whatever in the winter, and then they can service graze. And the other thing we're doing, cities of plants under the soil, under the solar panels, and then of course that becomes great pollinator habitat and insect habitat. And then we bring in sheep, because we don't have to raise up the panels as high. Of goats, what they would like to do is just jump up on top of the solar panels. So that doesn't work very well. And so sheep work really. And it helps bring instead of using herbicides and killing it, it helps that respiration cycle again for water, for rain. It provides a food and fiber source. We're hoping, because of using sheep and solar and bringing back more sheep, we can then maybe restart the wool market a bit, so we can have sustainable fiber, because unfortunately cotton is very hard to grow organically. There's very few areas like one of the heaviest pesticides used crops. So we want to have clean cotton. So hemp's another one, of course, we can do, and it can be clothing. So we can do that with it. The other thing about sheep are they're much easier for people to handle, that they're not as big. Of course, they flock together. So yeah, there's just, and as I said, young people now can get into farming by doing service grazing and that's how we're gonna, they worry about, we're gonna have to cut down more rainforests and stuff to produce more meat. And actually, no, we best tool for that. And plus, they can be integrated throughout the Midwest and areas that have become monocultures of grains, and soybeans and stuff for that, and soy use now for, the biofuels, which I'm not really thinking that's such a great idea, and traditionally they've been used as like more natural lubricants, and they're doing packaging. Remember the number, but 2 or 3 years ago, I read an article about how many patents are being put out every year to grow, for different uses for soybeans. For like anything, it's hard to maintain them over vast areas. So what they'll do is they'll come in, and it's greed driven. So they come in and they cut the wood and they sell that, and then you have all the stumps and everything. So then they bring the cows in to alive. In fact, it can even kind of keep growing into another tree. And so in a grazing situation, if you keep eating those little sprouts off, the stump will die a lot quicker. So you don't have to spend a lot of money and heavy equipment to stump the hill, but their intention is to plant soybeans or corn or some other crop. So the intention is not to beef graze it. The intention is to use the beef as a tool again. And so we've got cropland in the United States that benefits greatly from integrating these animals again, herbivores and ruminants. And so, problem is really on the earth, the problem. It's just, or land to grow food. It's just that we've been trashing so much of the land that it won't grow anything anymore. And that's where they tend to move on and try to find some new land. But instead of to live, a pig needs to live like a pig, and a cow needs to live like a cow. And of course, one other thing that a friend of mine of meat when it grazes plants. That gets into the cow. So in other words, a cow is basically a plant-based food source. And we can now measure, it's called the metabolomics. We can measure all the different compounds that are very important to our diet that we can get from eating those 200 plus different plants. So if you're like a plant-based or a vegan, you know, try being challenged by different plants that all have beneficial little polyphenols and terpenes and all the little beneficial things, not just the main things we think about, the main by. And so, and it's a huge difference in percentage. And of course, that fat too, that omega-3 fat that you get instead of omega-6, or even, you know, compared to the worst fats, which are the seed oil, highly processed, highly hydrogenated, you know, those are the fats that are really it's really a condensed superfood. And then we can balance it off with our fruits and plants and grain. And the more we produce all these things with the microbe of the soil, we get a huge chemical. Have to eat 5 or 6 or 7 to get the same nutrition, which makes you realize, you know, the junk. Of course, the junky grown is what gets subsidized. The really good stuff, doing it right, there's no subsidies in that system. So that's where we're going to change our health. Huge difference on our health. And we got a $4.7 trillion sick care industry. And we think we can knock that back about 80%. So that the reason why you're going to go to the hospital, you won't be taking all these pills or the GLPs, Ozempic, because we're all overweight because we eat too much. You know, mostly because of the ultra processed foods that a lot of them are designed to be addictive, but we're always hungry because we're eating stuff that doesn't, it's what we call the fruit and vegetable has become kind of like cardboard now. We call green paper baby, you know, all that stuff's just not healthy. It's just not doing it. So it's really hopeful. We're just really excited about it. We got farmers excited about it. They're saving a lot of money. We're going to starve the chemical and pesticides companies because we're just not buying their product anymore. We don't need it. Pests only eat dead and diseased. They don't eat healthy plants. About over $2.5 million a year. Now he's giving them nothing. We don't have to fight them. We can just starve them out. We don't need it, and everything will be healthy. And he's saving money. He's saving we can use the technology to understand that science. And so our health, the health of the planet, we know how to do it now. We can do it in 5 to 10 years. All it takes is the effort and getting it out. Relationship of food and ag to our health and our environment. And he's finally gotten that out so that I'm hearing it more and more. I was on C-SPAN this morning and they brought a doctor in and he was talking about how
But who had her first space, she had it all going on. She was from the United States Navy. She had a gay son who had substance problems. She had a mom who was MAGA.
About yields. How are yields looking with a polyculture regenerative space compared to a space? Is it
one crop of one thing a year, you're going to gain. When you've got really degraded soil and you're transitioning, you'll have a little bit of yield drop initially, but eventually you'll end up with more droughts and floods because you're going to be controlling that water. So that's big benefit. And for example, with dry land corn, in other words, corns that not irrigated, there was a record for that in the world that hadn't been done. And 2 years ago, it was a first generation regenerative farmer. The old record was about 430, I think it's 432, something like that, bushels per acre. And he was trying to really intensify to hit the maximum. This was a little challenge. And so he did add a little bit of synthetic nitrogen into it because he's not on the best dirt, best soil. He's not in the best climate. And all GMO plants and stuff. If conditions are ideal, you can get pretty good yield. But they're not very resilient when you either have droughts or flooding times. So that's where they really lose. That's why we're getting a lot of big farms that are starting to transition because we're getting a lot more extreme weather. And when they have that, they'll often call us crazy, lunatic, regenerative farmers because it just doesn't look like their farm. And then you have a drought or you get a heavy rain and they drive by your place, and it's like, how? That's when they start sitting with you at the coffee shop or whatever. So, in a way, these extreme weathers of climate change are making the transition happen a lot faster. So, the other thing is, we're thinking about the nutrition. So, what we're thinking. We're a lot of taking the other one because you don't know, it'll be a lot easier if we could just eat our regular diet and even a little junk food, but at least if that, all those, you know, weed or whatever was grown so it's nutrient dense and it doesn't have chemicals on it. We don't have to change our diet dramatically. We certainly got to cut out the sugar addictions. I mean, that's been a problem. But otherwise, that's the way regenerative farmers are looking at it. It's like if we change all the base ingredients and get them nutrient dense with the spectrum, even if they did. It's like, how come you won't eat your fruits and vegetables? And of course, I'm kind of the same way when I go look at supermarket fruits and vegetables because they don't taste like anything. Why would I eat something that basically tastes like cardboard? That's a natural reaction that your body has as to whether something is good to eat or not. And nutrition has to be like it. They'll eat it. And then you give them the stuff that isn't, and they won't eat it. And it'll just turn them off. So with adults, it's for you. It just turns us off. If you go by, you should smell a tomato. It should be so nutrient dense that you have that tomato. And that
Thank you. I want to say that I agree. It seems that climate change is forcing the transition across the board and even locally, because as all these price increases or
Earthpunk again. Glad you made it. Ollie, some points.
Yeah, I've got a question for Ed, I'm afraid. Where are you at? I've been doing, on Monica's advice, we've been looking at Brazil a bit, which is in a really terrible. you know, when they've cleared the rainforest and they decided either planting up on it or grazing on it, and the soils, as we know, are pretty poor quality, designed for rainforest. Or is that just not going to happen?
Actually, in Brazil, there's a lot of regenerative farmers going down, working down there. So it's happening in Brazil. So if let's say you've got a field or in the Midwest or Brazil that's what you don't, so you've still got the potential there. It's not able to be processed by the organisms. Now, you'll naturally years, you lose the organic matter and you lose all those soluble nutrients. And that's where they have to add the fertilizer. So if you've got really heavily degraded land, we'll get the microbes to break down the chemicals, neutralize that, and same as like in Chernobyl, you know, nature's actually restored those contaminated soil, you know, dirt into soil pretty well. So the best way to do it is seasonally growing, you know, cooler season, warmer season crops. And that'll bring the life and the organic matter back to your soil the fastest. And then you can start integrating crop into it. Farmers that have degraded their land and they don't want to do livestock. They don't know how to do livestock. So we, you know, look at it like sort of in a vegetarian or a vegan type way, and you can do it with plants. It won't happen as quickly, but you'll still be able to do it. So that's where we do the diversity of crops. We rotate the crops because each crop will produce different organisms. Each plant has a different root structure. What is that? Every plant tells us a story because nature puts it there intentionally because it benefits the soil. And if you've got a lawn with a lot of dandelions and you do a soil test on it, you'll pretty much realize it's low in calcium. Well, what do dandelions? They have a very deep taproot, and that taproot goes way down deep in the soil because all these elements have different weights. So a heavier weighted element is going to sink. Gravity. So, and especially if you don't have any structure in your soil or any carbon to hold it. So dandelions will go down and they'll tap that. And then that plant, you know, as it grows and dies and grows and dies, it deposits calcium. And what you'll find is over time, up enough calcium, and they don't want to actually grow in a soil that's got a lot of calcium near the surface. So that's what we're calling plant succession. So, and that's the way we look at all weeds. I mean, they're not weeds, they're just plants, you know. The general characteristic of plants in nature that we can kind of consider is weeds grow very quickly and they put out a ton of seeds. And that's what nature does. You know, nature wants to constantly cover the ground. So if you've got a yard that you've just been growing grass in, air through, been sitting in that soil waiting for that condition, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of weeds. Now you've got your lawn all around that, and there's no weeds really in your lawn. And of course, you keep cutting. Instead of rototilling it, or let's say and then plant the plants that you want that can just really benefit the soil by being the right type of plant. And so that's how we change that system to do it. You know, we become the stewards, you know, of having the right kind of plants in that situation. So yeah, you can do it with just plants.
I wasn't taking any notes. I can't remember.
What's being
It's recorded. That's right. Right.
And let me add,
Yeah.
main thing I think they can actually
the concept of rewilding is a very slow process.
Yep.
It can
Right.
take hundreds of years. We can speed up. We can take what nature would do in 100 or 200 years. Or more.
it's a way of saving their bloody country, for goodness sake. If they actually embrace these farming, you know, methods, that it's going to really help them. Something has to snap.
Africa needs it badly.
Yeah.
Because, you know, because they've got a lot of desertified land. Me last week, they want to learn about this. All that Middle East area, a lot of that could be regreened again and get their water cycling happening again and be able to produce food. I mean, we don't have any problem producing food for everybody that's nutritious. That's not a problem, but we just have to do it right. And we've been doing it wrong. And that's where, you know, we're really in trouble. And that's why we have so much starvation. And where our health, we spend the most on healthcare and we have the worst outcomes because it's all about drugs and treatment. It's food is medicine. That's what we got to get back to.
Yeah. The same fossil fuel industrial civilization, colonizing reformation, rethinking, and everything Ed has been talking about.
We're cutting our fossil fuel use. If you think, you see those planting. All of our guys have cut their horsepower that they need in a tractor by half.
Right.
And they've also cut their fossil fuel use.
Available, people didn't use it very efficiently. They get a gallon of gas for almost nothing and run the equipment. They weren't trying to do an efficiency. They had no plan, and we ended up here in this mess. And supply the food, and then on the demand side, in this global north, people have to learn about food. We need food education, as Ed was saying, and it's so often the same stories intertwined. My other thought, Ed, is I come at this like Jim, really concerned with the environmental poly crisis. They're trying to help, and the physics type minds are engaged when they really should be studying atoms and quarks and quasars and the more it takes me an effort to snap into biological thinking. It's just not the way my brain works. I can do it with effort, but it doesn't come naturally to me. So that there's always that sort of physics biology divide. I wanted to mention was that Braiding Center at UMass Amherst, the Braiding Center for Indigenous and investigating the right thing. They stood in 2023. They started that center. So I would like to get to Eva and see how she's doing. I think you mentioned that.
She moved 3 weeks ago to a old people's home, and I've been very busy and rotating, and to have people transport furniture there. And now last week I was busy renting out her apartment, which she owns, and I found one through my climate activist group who happens to I've been looking for an apartment in Berlin. We just checked everything. He cleaned up the stuff. We cleared out the cellar, which was full with stuff, and people are coming to pick up from it. So they pick up stuff for free that can still be sold, old stuff, and then they sell it at a low price to people who don't sell furniture and household items. I think that's a very good thing, since many people today don't have that much money, and they need it, or young people or foreigners who just need a lot of stuff to build up. And so I'm pretty tired from that. But today we were also in our neighboring town in Potsdam, which is very beautiful, a historic town with beautiful architecture. And we went, and a huge park, and there they have an exposition right now called Regeneration. It's a sort of art project in the public, like with water management and planting new heat resistant trees and so on, what they will do. And we as climate activists say, okay, that's a good start. Activists say, okay, that's a good start to adapt to with orange warning vest that I don't know if you know these well. We have it working on roads. They also wear that. So we dressed this a statue in the orange vest, and took photos, and we made postcards of that, and we handed them out of of this whole garden park, and asked him to not only address climate adaptation, but also the climate talk. And even less in in our aim to stop fossil fuels. Um, so then we moved on. There was also a festival nearby. for Germany, the AfD, which is a ultra right. That was encouraging today. Yeah, and one other thing I want to bring up is what I just posted down in the chat, which makes me a bit speechless, is the criminalization of climate activists, even in Germany. I mean, we all heard about the people in England, people who were sentenced to 4 and 5 years in jail because of climate activism, and now 2 seniors who in 2022 just turned off with a steering wheel pipelines in northern Germany. They were sentenced to, I think, 6 and 3 months in jail, and yeah, I mean, these are people of 60, 70 years and older, and the judges just say, okay, they broke the fence and they went in there and turned off the pipeline. Yeah, they didn't blow up a pipeline. Maybe you know the movie, yeah, and the book, and they are about different things. The book is not about how to blow up a pipeline. The film is, which I find a bit shocking, but it's also a very good movie, playing in America, and also including very sensitively the view of Native American and Black American people, and their suffering from the fossil fuel industry, and also just a white farmer who lost his land because of that, and he went into this union of people who then blew up a pipeline in that movie. Anyway, these 2 seniors in Germany, they just turned off a pipeline, and the people from the company, they could just off on again and open it again, and nothing was destroyed. Yeah, and they have to go to jail for that now. Yeah, and that really, really leaves me speechless concerning our democracy. I mean, we know that in many countries, people are turning to hard leaders, and they want the strong men and hardline, and no foreigners, and everything's supposed to be as it was, and they want the patriarchy, and they don't want to listen to science and all this. Yeah, but this is even reaching the intelligent judges, and that they don't dare, or they don't want to just acknowledge that these people are so loyal to the government, loyal to the rulings of our highest court, loyal to our constitution, which demands that in Article 20A that the foundations of living for the future generations have to be protected. And yeah,
Can I say
things
something
are
about
really
Can I mention
Things are
something
really
about this?
turning bad now.
You can't hear me.
What?
Can I mention
Pardon?
something about this? The problem here is what is legally considered to be a crime and what is not a crime. So, for example, people who were on the gantries here on the motorways or even on the roads, they weren't getting sentences in jail. They were actually, if they were in for a short while, they were usually let off, as it were, by the judge. But the problem is when people start to mess with pipelines or I think the 5 who were jailed in England were basically having a Zoom where they were talking about doing stuff like drones or whatever. When there's that involved,
Exactly.
Unfortunately, that if you turn off a pipeline, you are actually you're meddling with somebody else's stuff. If you're sitting in the road, you are actually just sitting in the road, and there are laws that go back centuries about right of way and about what people can actually do with roads. So it's not such a big deal. A good judge can spot that and let people off. But if you're messing with people's infrastructure, one way or another, then that is a crime or criminal intent, and you'll get time in prison for it. So there is actually a legal difference between the two. It's not as though they're just locking people up because they really want to. My God, not in the UK. They're having to let people out of prison because they've got no room for them. So there is this, if you like, this difference between the two, which is difficult to see with climate in the way, obviously, but it does exist. It's just a legal difference. Sometimes they will imprison people, and at the same time, they will say, we're sorry, we have to do this. It just so happened, actually, for the 5 that did get imprisoned in the UK for the Zoom call, they had a horrible judge. I nearly said priest there, God. They had a horrible judge, a really nasty piece of work. So, yeah, it's, as you say, there's a difference. Back to you.
Certainly, Germany is a major economic global power, a major democracy, and it's not just the USA or China that determines everything in the big power world. Germany is a big power, and this AFD is very concerning. We watched The Zone of Interest last night, a fascinating film on World War II in Germany. And when we talk about how, who was talking about, was it you, Oliver, talking about flying over the rainforest? It was Robert. Robert was talking about the tourists all going crazy, not noticing anything while the rainforests are burning and getting cut down.
No, exactly, yeah.
And this film was like that. The commander of the concentration camp and his family, his private life, with the wall, not noticing anything that was going on. And as primates, as mammals, we need to do that to function. We need to put on blinders and just function, take care of our needs, get our food, get our water, have our shelter. It does require a certain amount of blindness to be able to focus on these missions. That said, when we're well, when we're not ill, when we're not hurting, when we don't need intensive healing, when we're well and we can focus outward and talk to others and care about others and try to help others, that far right doesn't show any interest in this process for whatever reason. That far right who are healthy and fine, they show no interest in any kind of altruism. I don't, we can get into the whys of it, but that's the way it is. Over the last 10 years, we've talked repeatedly about the global rise of populism. And to me, it just comes so naturally to fight it. There's sort of no question in my mind. I'm going to fight it. We can't have this far right proto-fascism. It is 100% unacceptable in any nation, in any place. So I just have no doubt it's sort of easy. And of course, those far right people have showed absolutely no concern whatsoever about any kind of environmental crisis at all. As a matter of fact, they just love taking big oil's money. There's no problem with that. So here we are again on another Saturday, as we have the equinox tomorrow, and we go around the bend. The Earth is going around the bend. This is the Climate Crisis Club 95. This is what we do on Saturdays. I hope everyone gets a lot out of it in some ways. It's a club. It's not a workshop. It's not a work group. It's not supposed to be too intense. The summer before, the summer of '93, we had an awful lot of talk of American politics. We had a lot of people going on tangents, a lot of people in despair. And in terms of the club, I think we've done a great job since then of really being on topic, of being more confident that we can get the job done. And really everyone deserves a lot of applause for all the work and effort and paying attention and posting and talking and living in this effort, because that is what it will take to have success. More than anything else, it is social. We are social animals, and we need to keep going. Since day one of this club, I have been campaigning for Indigenous involvement all the time since day one, that this kind of Euro science routine and Euro philosophy is just not going to do the trick. Just not happening. All the physics and machines and everything we ever had in Europe and Euro Americas, it's not going to do it. We need this kind of global Indigenous knowledge where the children, the small children, the babies, as they're taught, are taught this vision of life, this intertwined being with the land. It is instinctive to our Indigenous friends. In my Euro upbringing, it just didn't happen. My mom did just love nature. My father, I don't think he ever noticed nature. And my mother and I would constantly go to the park or whatever nature was available. But I certainly got no kind of education about the land, about how intertwined with the land we are. I grew up in a big city. Go ahead, Pup, by all means. Hi.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, since we're talking about right-wing nut jobs, I had some political signs down by the entrance on my property, not on the road right away, but on my property. Political signs, one for Harris, another one for Ann Schultz, and Amy Klobuchar. And I noticed today that some right-wing nut job came by and removed the Harris Walls sign.
Happy sure it wasn't the bear.
I'm reasonably sure it wasn't the bear. But anyway, I went out, stopped by my local Cass County DFL and got an even bigger fucking Walls sign. And the guys are going to come by and put it up while I'm on the road today. But then I'm going to get a trail cam and I'm going to take a picture of that MFer. And I know the sheriff of Cass County, and guess what? That's trespassing, vandalism, etc. And I am going to press fucking charges. He's lucky he didn't come up the driveway, because I'd have something else for him and then have to use the backhoe. But anyway, no, I just, I live in, I'm a blue dot in the middle of red, and this has happened before, and I'm just sick and frickin' tired of people coming onto my property and trespassing, et cetera, and vandalizing shit. So Anyway, I just wanted to
Yeah,
contribute that.
it's a great story, and keep us updated. We support you. I have so much confidence that Harris will be president, and at least for us Americans, it'll be a little sunnier and a little more cheerful. Our outlook, that we will find a little more joy in our day. Pop always comes up with these great stories, and he does have this black bear wandering around there, so it sure sounds like her style to me, but he's getting the bigger sign, and we will find out what happens.
By
yeah.
the way, that DFL rep lives about a mile away from me. And while we were shooting the breeze about the sign, we got onto the topic of bees, and come to find out John also had bees, and he had to move, 20 some odd hives to southern Minnesota so that the bear wouldn't, trash 10 or 12 hides like the bear did to me. So it's not, I'm not she's not picking on me.
Yeah.
She's locating hives all over the place. And anyway.
Well, that is slightly reassuring that you're not just being bullied. The bear is an equal opportunity bullier. And she knows you guys are just not going to mow her down, just taking advantage of that, and
yeah, John wouldn't shoot her. He's not that kind of a guy. I'm the kind of a guy where if she comes at me, guess what?
Yeah.
She's going to get 5,000 grains of lead
Well,
in
she
her.
knew that too. This bear is not dumb. It's
Can't you train the bear to eat the maggot?
Yeah, maybe she knows better than to fuck with a Vietnam combat vet. I don't know.
Well,
Maybe
of
not.
course
Be trained to
the
eat the
bear
maggot when he removes the sign.
Yeah, well, the bear might require her own space. She could easily take over this space if we let her.
Eat the maggot.
Yeah, we'll have drones up there and webcams and be documenting the life of the bear, making her an internet star. And I don't know. I don't know why people bother with signs.
Nibble the maggot then.
Yeah, the intimidation is most irritating. Like they enjoy. Well, we have our.
It's because they're losing. It's because they're losing. It's obvious.
Yeah, obviously. But we do in Dr. Mike's Wednesday space discuss the politics, and we discuss a lot about Reconstruction period in America after the Civil War and Jim Crow, all the bullying techniques. As Law Sue and Eugene were saying earlier, the racism and the hatred. I just don't know. And the climate justice, the just transitions, it's all intertwined. I do have great confidence that they're all losing at this point, as Oliver just said, globally. And the cornered beast is far more ferocious. When they know the jig is up, they do get quite ferocious. And I think that's the stage we're in now. The big oil, they can see the writing on the wall. They know quite a lot. They study this stuff. They know how much oil's in the ground. They know what the CO2 count is. They know all this stuff. They're not ignorant. They just get the cognitive dissonance. They choose to ignore it and keep selling and keep promoting. Big ag and big food is going to be having the same kind of thing. And here we are. It's a lot. Intellectualism, using the mind, thinking, communicating, good faith, friendship, trust. It's a lot to take without hard results. I know. Intellectualism is a lot to accept, as there is no distinct validation in winning a prize. That said, it's worked every single time in the past. In each movement, in each progress of civilization. And it's confidence that we're doing the right thing, we're heading in the right direction. I don't know, Oliver. It's a
Well, as
you muted yourself.
as an alien, I would say I've never seen such an important election in America in my lifetime. Anyway, it just seems absolutely so important. This one, I know that's stating the obvious, but even so, you know, for the climate, my God, you know, it's just horrifying that the Blues have to win it. It's as simple as that. Have to. It mustn't be, and nothing else can be allowed. Doesn't necessarily mean play dirty. It means play fair and play smart. You know, that's simple, isn't it? But it has to be won. This one has to be.
Yeah, it's us Americans don't know that feeling. I know a little bit from Greece and the small country, and then there's the pseudo archaeology. I trying to wrap my head around ancient apocalypse and this fantasy narrative that Graham Hancock of the UK comes up with. He makes narratives about the past, about past civilizations. And he has a best-selling, a top program on Netflix. I've been trying to tie this to environmentalism and haven't really made the connection yet.
Well, it is certainly there as regards the maggots. You know, I mean, that's absolutely obvious that they are living this false narrative. Not necessarily some kind of thing in the past, but it's certainly all fake, false, and it may be presented as being quite sort of seductive to certain people, but it is absolutely wrong and wicked and false. And that's what your ancient sort of nonsense that you're talking about is tied to. With the environment is the environment. I mean, you know, we know that the climate is the climate, and the environment is what it is, and you can't really necessarily mess with that, fake it. It would always come back at you with the truth of itself. But certainly with the maggots, I mean, that is clearly is their thing. It's just spouting bullshit and keep saying it until these people, these whatever they are, these people who support Trump for some reason, believe it. I mean, it's just nonsense.
Nonsense. And that's a fascinating distinction you made. They don't try to tell us that the rainforest is made out of cheese. Or
what in the world did I walk into?
They don't try to tell us that the Congo River is made out of Pepsi-Cola. When it comes to the environment, it's more about apathy and just ignoring it. You know, ignore the DDT, ignore the asbestos. It's a different strategy. Whereas with this political thing, telling us that the Haitians eat dogs and cats is complete fantasy. They're making up those narratives. And
Racismo.
yeah, I'd love to welcome Wynn Brings Comfort back to the conversation and see what she makes of all this. Hi, Wynn. How are you today?
I'm good, Alex. Thanks for hosting this space and allowing me to speak. So I was hearing you, regrettably commiserate about the status of our political systems here in the United States. And you said something that really caught my attention that was along the lines of what I wanted to comment about anyways. So Ed was talking earlier about kind of large scale big ag and the work they're doing to get away from monoculture gardening, this type of soil restoration that needs to happen, and getting into like the larger idea of the food web of how complex that entire system is. And I feel like a lot of these people that have that aren't very climate inclined or observant about the environment in general are fundamentally just lacking a relationship with the land in any way, shape, or form. And culturally, when you say it that way, like all of a sudden it's like, oh, what is this mystical like Indian person talking about? And it's not even that complicated. I feel like something that really plagues a lot of modern society, especially in these urban centers we have, is a fundamental disconnection from the land. And gardening is such a simple gateway activity to develop a relationship with the land, but I feel like a lot of people in the city don't realize that it's more accessible than they realize. Like even if you live in an apartment and you don't have your own land, you can grow microgreens in a glass on your counter and grow your own food and feed yourself, at least on some level. You can do container gardening and harvest things like peppers and tomatoes and different seasonal plants that are appropriate for your environment. And then if you have a little bit of land, most people just have like, you know, that monoculture lawn out in the front that looks pretty, but you literally have land. You have a resource that you're not actually using to grow anything meaningful. Like you're not using it to sustain yourself in any way. And you know, people start to talk about permaculture movements and stuff like that. The way I had learned it growing up is called soft touch gardening, where indigenous people would go and, you know, be stewards of the land and maintain the forests. But out when you go in the forest, they would identify different, you know, microclimate areas and be farming out there in balance with nature, which kind of aligns with what Ed was saying too. But I just feel like gardening in general is something that is more accessible than people realize. And if more people did that, they would start to develop relationships with the land and understand, you know, their place with the rest of society, that you're not just one person on your own island, that I just got to get mine because my actions don't impact everyone because their actions do. That's what I want to share. You mentioned like, I don't get why they think this way. And it's like, yeah, they don't care about the climate because they don't fundamentally on a very low level have a connection with the land.
Exactly. Very well put. I think sometimes too, talking to non-native people, it helps to talk to them on a much simpler level about the land. I was starting to tell my story of growing up in New York City. I go to Central Park every day, but I had almost no land connection at all. I was sitting there in concrete. And for many people, certainly of European extraction, they are just not exposed to this concept at an early age of being very, very interconnected with the land. It just does not come naturally to those of European extraction. I think many of those white people are happy. Certainly the environmentalists love later on in life learning about the land and the trees and the wind and all of it. Environmentalism is seen as a philosophy. Philos means friend in Greek. So philosophy is friendship and talking and thoughts. I love the soft touch gardening. I didn't know about soft touch gardening. That's a great expression. I'm also thinking about the Oak Flat and the situation out there that we want to remember with the Apache people. Oh, sacred. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think Oak Flat and DAPL are examples of, you know, like someone was saying, well, if you're blocking a road, you have a right of way to the road and that, and it's like, yeah, but people were protesting Dakota Access Pipeline because the government was in violation of the treaties. And here in the United States, treaties with the tribes are supposed to be the highest law of the land, like higher than our Constitution. And here you have these corporate entities, many of them are not even from the United States, that come and they buy the politicians, they buy the judges, and they allow these things to go through in violation of our fundamental laws. And so when people go to defend that right and defend our laws, I mean, I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, but we have to go to extreme measures because they're already in violation of the law when they do those things to begin with. I mean, I don't have all the answers. It's easy to get frustrated and angry with this because, you know, we're being wronged, and that anger is seated is when there's an identified injustice and like your spirit recognizes it. But listening in these spaces gives me hope. One thing I see that's a huge disconnect is just the difference in valuation systems. Like Eurocentric views tend to view land as a commodity to be extracted, whereas indigenous views, we recognize it as a living entity that we have to be in balance and in relationship with. Because I think the land, it's one thing to divorce yourself of the land, but it's another thing if the land divorces itself of you.
Yeah, the living entity and modern science, global science, is starting to recognize that the land in the as a living entity, the whole huge system, it is starting to become part of modern science. It is starting to be recognized as a truth by modern science. The Gaia theory, the 8 billion cubic kilometer Dyson sphere around the planet where all the life we know about is located, it you know, is looked at as one huge living system that we're all just small parts of, all interconnected. And
Here's the
it's
thing, Alex. What you can get is the alternative to that, which is the whole system is geared towards separation from those ideals, if you like, those wholesomenesses. Basically, you have like an agribusiness that is completely fractured and broken up, so that, for example, maggots, I'm not saying just maggots, but they may, for example, be in this system whereby they are part of the agribusiness, but it's all the kind of bits and pieces of it, the horrible bits, the broken up parts. So they're not getting all the Gaian aspects of it, the whole unified part of it. They're just in the horrible bits. So they don't care who, you know, about the planet. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about the climate. All they care about is, you know, their rise or their income or so on and so forth. But they certainly are in a broken system. That's very true. So they do not care. And you're right. The trick is to try and get them back in that. The scientists might be in it, but it's the people that are doing the actual work that aren't. They're in the sort of awful, sort of grotty, grunt end version of agribusiness.
we listen to Wind Brings Comfort, which is a great name, of course, but we listen to Wind Brings Comfort, and she speaks very well and has a great future speaking to the people and explaining some of these truths and getting people aboard the program, getting them excited and interested and hopeful and thinking. And that's kind of the methodology of going forward. That there are many problems. You know, that I look at Oak Flat. I didn't do my homework this week and study Oak Flat, but I see the name Resolution Copper, and it's immediately like, oh, those guys, they're back to their tricks again. You know, just digging up around the world again, and you know, no matter wherever it makes the most profit. And here we go with the copper mining story again. I forgot about Resolution Copper, Rio Tinto, and all that. And we have in this club repeatedly discussed minimal sustainable mining. We need a certain amount of mining around the world to keep this industrial whatever civilization, you know, some minimal level to keep the internet going, to keep people alive. The UN says we're going to peak at 10.3 billion, the global population. So we've got to design systems that will feed and house everyone, get people some electricity, some internet. And we do need some kind of minimal sustainable mining. There are ways of doing mining that isn't this insane, profit crazy, colonial greedy system, extractive growing nonsense. So we've discussed that many times. And this is an open forum where we listen to whoever wants to speak, and we understand their concerns. As far as I'm concerned personally, I'm absolutely delighted to endlessly listen to North American natives about their lives and issues and thoughts and whatever they would like to say. I'm absolutely happy to endlessly listen. But again, it's who was speaking recently. Eva in Germany. Germany is a major piece of the puzzle. Paul and Oliver in the United Kingdom. The English colonials, after they defeated the Spanish in the Spanish Armada in 1596, they were all ready to send the fleets out around the world with economic and military and religious and a whole colonizing story. They carried those European diseases with them. North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Australia. They didn't get to Antarctica until something like 1902. But that is the story. It's funny when we talk to Wilson about Captain Cook, he thinks Captain Cook is terribly funny, as his life and career ended in Hawaii.
Yeah, well, I mean, Captain Cook was an interesting case, I mean, you got me here like researching, researching mining right now, right? Because that is a question of like, so how do we make mining more sustainable, right? How do we minimize the environmental impact that we cause when we're mining? I mean, there's stuff that we obviously can't avoid, right? We if you're going to mine somewhere, you're going to deforest the place, right? You're going to move the soil, right? You're going to end up scattering dust all up into the air. I didn't know that they were using like toxic chemicals for mining, and that stuff was like leaking into the water. I would think that you should be able to either reuse that soil somehow, or make it into something that's rich and nutritious. And then, of course, reuse the soil. But, like, very interesting topic, I think, and it's something that we definitely should talk about is, how to create systems that are more environmentally friendly and stable. Talking about things like cutting a highway through the freaking forest, right? I was very naive to the fact that cutting the forest in half would deal so much damage to it, right? And then there's even the issue of like, how do you allow animals to cross freely through those areas and not interfere with traffic? And very, like, to me, it's like those are the kinds of issues that I'd really like to be talking about and figuring out.
Yeah, and if you saw, like, I'm looking at Chile as the second largest producer of lithium. Speaking of using chemicals, some of the South America, the way they get lithium out of the ground, it's absolutely insane. Right on, Wilson. Excellent speech. Let's get right back to Wind, who has given us some great words today. Hi, Wind.
Yeah, I think with mining, I mean, it's very problematic. There's no getting around that. But probably the best analogy I have for the way, at least I personally view the mining industry, is back when settlers were first moving into like buffalo territory. Traditionally, if a native person kills a buffalo during buffalo hunt, the entire animal is used, like every last part of it is used. And when settlers were first arriving, they would slaughter buffalo, and all they would take would be the tongues, and they would leave the rest to just kind of rot on the prairie. And I feel like there's an analogy with that within the mining industry, because the mining industry is just extract, and generate some sort of profit. And we're starting to see more studies, like, for example, you mentioned lithium. We're finding that some of the tailings that are coming out, they can then be processed a second time, and it's actually they have higher lithium yields, and it's a way to like recapture some that they're already mining to begin with, without disturbing new sites and destroying new parcels of land. And I feel like, I mean, yeah, we do need some of these minerals to sustain our way of life, but we're not looking at the technology to fully capture what's already been extracted to begin with. And recycling is one, and like repurposing some of these old materials, especially from like old electronics, old wiring that already has these minerals like available and on land. Like right now, the US solution in general is, hey, let's dump it in a landfill, or hey, let's put it on a barge and ship it to China and let them deal with it. And I just feel like no one talks about that. There's no interest in it. But it's like we've already, the mining companies have already done the work of extracting it. It's gone through processing. You know, they've already refined it into a usable material. And because that usable material isn't being powered, people think it's trash, when it's like, that has a purpose and can actually, like, if everyone in the sphere did that, it would make a very sizable difference. But there's no interest or investment in it. And so I just feel like there's more sustainable solutions that are able to recapture, like I said, some of these minerals that have already been extracted, but we're not thinking in that way because there's not the mechanisms in place to more effectively generate capital. And it's not about generating the product and using it in the most effective ways. It's about generating the product to produce the greatest profit.
Absolutely. It's very clear to you. And this insane profit creation, like obsessive, insane profit creation, that in the end only profits just a few of the ultra wealthy. Doesn't seem like that nature comes, that kind of insane profit nature. It's hard to understand. That's the way they're built. That's how they think. That's the way they see this reality. And from the outside, we can see that it just doesn't work very well. And mining's such a great example. It's so obvious. They're just trashing pollution everywhere, making a mess. The language starts to fail me. I don't know what they think they're doing. At some point, there has to be some kind of reckoning for all of them. There's some kind of truth. In scientific terms, again, the ecology, the life, the biology will just run, and all these fantasies will come crashing down. That in people's minds, some of those people with these weird fantasies in their minds, they will get too far disconnected from the actual reality out there. Let's hear from Earthpunk. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think a lot of what has been happening over the last 4 years is driven by climate change, even when we aren't thinking about it. And I'm thinking specifically inflation. Inflation has been through the roof, and we all know what climate change will do to the price of food naturally. But this is also true on all of the products that are created.
They do call it climate inflation.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. So all of these events are happening. Roads are destroyed, buildings are destroyed, people lose their jobs, and this drives the price of products up across the board. And I think what we're going to see happen is that it becomes just really significantly harder to extract profit while all of these events increase moving into the future. And I think we're going to see a shift probably in the next few years or decade or so, where we start to realize that you absolutely can't, in the long term, run a profit without giving respect to the earth itself.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And many of those people will try to make that profit at any cost. I mean, it's hard to understand how excessive they are. their lack of concern about human life or any life, animal life, plant life, the oceans, the mountains, the sky, anything. Their reason to be on this earth in their minds is to get that profit, whether it's mining here, there, and everywhere, mining under the ocean, mining the mountains, mining in the deserts, cutting down all the trees and
Don't forget
mining.
the asteroids too, because that's like the new frontier. And I actually know someone that's like working on legislation to define those laws of what's permitted. And for me, that's aggravating because it's like, yo, your environmental plan in on Earth is already insolvent. Why are you replicating that in new years, literally?
Yeah, I read the sci-fi book where they go mining the asteroids and they just keep it going, keep the profits going by slinging those minerals back into Earth orbit. I think, I mean, certainly for me, it's hard to understand that excessive desire for profit. And, you know, my father was good friends with David Rockefeller, and I went to the oldest boys' school in America with all the very, very rich people. I went to the Ivy League college. My parents were artists. I don't know what I was doing in that world. It didn't appeal to me. I don't understand it. It's kind of like a drug addict in my book. You could do cocaine or you could get completely obsessed with profit. That's all you think about all day. That's all you want to do. I don't know, but they really are that way in their heads, and that's what we're dealing with. You can show them a tree, they just don't care. They cut it down. That tree could be 500 years old. They don't care. They've killed, I think they killed 5 million whales. And again, that's 1% of the CO2 up in the air. Those whales used to do a job for us by keeping that carbon in their body. When the whale would die, they would sink to the bottom of the ocean. All that carbon would go down to the bottom of the ocean and be recycled in life. It was the nature over hundreds of millions of years had developed a beautiful system that worked very efficiently, and many of us stupid people showed up and kind of wrecked the whole. These people that wreck these systems, they can't go on much longer. It's been 200 years of this industrial way. It's been 400 years or so of this basic colonial way. The Roman Empire started 2,500 years ago. All these human civilizations with towns and agriculture started about 10,000 years ago. And human beings themselves started about 200,000 years ago, approximately. That's all modern science. And this business can't last much longer. That's kind of the good news. The bad news is we don't have 200 years to sit around and wait and watch this happen. So talking, sharing, reading, learning about kindness and respect of each other and of life, really. Not, as Lost Sue was saying this morning, not, or Eugene, not, forcing our views on other people. I don't know why that's such a popular thing to do. And that resolution copper, I've certainly signed 1,000 petitions and made 1,000 posts on them. I'll probably be wrapping my brain around what resolution copper is up to this week. The late 19th century, there was a copper boom in Wyoming, North and South Dakota. And of course, they would move, each time they decided there was a new boom, they would move the tribes around when the tribe just happened to be located on whatever they wanted next. The story just doesn't stop. And I don't know why we think it would stop. They're going to keep trying to push all of us around when they decide there's a gold rush. If it's AI, whatever their new excitement is, where the profits are, it seems to just drive them mad, again, like a strong drug would, that they don't know how to use. They have no skill. And this is our life. This is the world we live in. We can't let it emotionally aggravate us too much. Yeah, we can get angry. We can be sad. Yeah, if you have an Apple device, they have the soundboard. And I don't know. I mean, I do the Saturday hosting gig. I'm learning about spaces. I'm friendly. Lakota Man said that the Greek people weren't white. He said there were no white people in the Bible. I said that Paul went to Saloniki and Corinth. He said the Greek people weren't white. John is a great guy. I hope to God that he runs for political office. He keeps threatening to go to DC, but he does say he's worried about his family. And I don't blame him. I will happily keep on talking, spreading the thoughts. What do you think going south? Well, how's Greenland, man? What do you got for us?
Yeah, I was just thinking they didn't know, the people who hunted the whales, they had no idea, and they were securing oil for lamplight, street lights in Europe, in Amsterdam and London and Berlin, and so there's so much things that we blame our predecessors for, but they had no idea they were, destroying the atmosphere, and yeah, we should, be a little bit compassionate about them not knowing the evil that they did, right?
Right. There are two things. There's history and there's existential politics right now. Certainly all those whalers, Massachusetts here had a great tradition of whaling out of New Bedford, and Herman Melville wrote the great book Moby Dick out of New Bedford, Massachusetts. Yeah, those whalers certainly had no idea they were the destruction they were causing. And I don't want to, as you say, accuse them of great evil. That's not my intent. It's just that in today's world now, we've got to stop doing those methods. We can't keep killing all the whales. Certainly in the 19th century, I don't know if anybody had any idea that they were, really going to town and out of control. And I'd like to know which year it is that industrial society went from helping people to kind of going south.
I think nobody has any idea when that was. It's a great mystery and a great conundrum that we all know that we're on the wrong course now.
Yeah.
But when did I know? Did my father's generation know? Did my grandfather's? And I think when it comes to the climate, maybe the grandfathers or their fathers were sort of the most to blame, but they had absolutely no idea. So it's kind of the blame game when it comes to climate.
Right.
It's kind of mute.
I've learned from these spaces that the blame game is just a waste of time. Anytime I've started to blame somebody around here, it just goes nowhere. My question was for historians in world history. At which point the population exploded from that 1 billion to 8 billion. So in many ways, in the large picture, the fossil fuels helped more people to live longer lives. And then for historians, at some point, maybe in the 1950s or 1960s, that started wearing off. Not to say that many communities around the world weren't suffering during those 200 years. That's not my point. And again, I just found out today that they consider that there are 15,000 cultures right now on the earth. That's what we got, 15,000 cultures, the anthropologists. And again, these are general ideas, to sketch, to give us some idea. It's a fascinating question when we discuss colonization, which is so often the topic, European colonization, Euro-American colonization, that the point here is not to assign blame to anyone particularly, but to find solutions going forward is the point. When we discuss reparations, reparations is a gigantic modern American topic, just gigantic. We were talking with Kim Heller earlier from South Africa. So South Africa's constitution was written in 1993. They have huge issues with reparations and amnesty. But I think that it's not about the blame game. It's about us in real time today, facing facts, being honest, and all working together to move forward. Accepting, I mean, Norway was not a colonial power. Norway did not go around the world enslaving people, killing people, and so forth. Norway is not guilty of great colonial crimes. We generally are talking.
It's interesting because in Norway, colonized Iceland, but they had no people at all. And then we went on to colonize Greenland, and at that time, that part of Greenland had no people also. So it's like kind of a soft colonization, because it's only, you just grab some land and there's no people living there, right?
Right.
At first, for the first 1,000 years or 500 years anyway. But when it comes to reparations, it's interesting because I read a lot of books. It's part of being a writer. You have to read all the books, and it turns out that Norwegians, Vikings, whatever you call them back then, they were also taken as slaves by other Vikings from other parts of Norway or other parts of Scandinavia, right? So
yeah.
So it gets less political and more like a historical fact that lots of Norwegians, some of them Vikings, were taken as slaves by other Vikings from Trondheim or northern Norway or western Norway, eastern Norway, whatever. And it's not a racial thing. It's more like that was a thing back then, and what do we do about that? And for me, as a guy who has been following the Icelandic eruptions, the volcanic eruptions in Iceland, it's also interesting to note that the Grindavik, the city that has been, the town that has been seized, in siege by lava on all fronts for the past 9 months or so. They have a historic incident, which is in Wikipedia, that in the 1800s something, they were raided by what's called the Turks, which is really just the Arabs, because it was a grand Turkish empire back then. So they were raided by African slavers who came up to Iceland to take. So the Grindavik people of southwest Iceland were actually taking slaves and sold to slave markets in North Africa in the 1800s, and that's kind of documented in writing and in books and stuff. So just a long story just to say that slavery is not an USA American thing only. It has been going on for ages and ages, right? So
yes.
It's not about race per se in the larger history of things, I think.
The one of the things we can say about Scandinavia today, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, these countries have some of the best governments in the world. They certainly have the most freedom for women. They have some of the best press freedom rates in the world. That these governments have very, very successful. These nations have very, very successful governments that are leading the way in democracy theory. And I do have my Swedish American family and my Viking sons. I'm kind of an unofficial Viking, I think, by now. Low-key, huh? Yeah, no comments from the cheering section. And it's about all the people in the world and all their fascinating cultures and ways and histories. I find that one of the most exciting parts of this life is hearing everyone's stories from all the places and cultures. And like hearing Julian this morning and hearing some about his life, fascinating stories, and everyone here. I didn't know that if I will find out if the Arabs or the Moors, the Ottoman Empire, or whoever made it to Iceland. That is interesting. And yeah, the Laos, the town, the geoenergy there. Iceland is always interesting to scientists because it's the group of people that are the most, the 200,000 or so, are the most genetically similar of anywhere in the world. So all kinds of interesting genetic studies. And when you go north, when you live north in the cold winters, you must cooperate together, or everybody in the village will die. It's not really American general attitude, but the spirit of cooperation is something that age of industrial capitalism was lacking. That age of individualism and people just looking out for themselves, that age is ending. Whether some of that is Gaia's pressure forcing us to wake up and live, or the forces of history.
It's fascinating anyway.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the whales. It's not so much the whale industry, if you like, of the 18th, 19th century. It's more about the consciousness, isn't it? I mean, they decided at some point that slavery was like not on from a human point of view. They must have understood at the same time that destroying the flora and the fauna, particularly, and obviously the top end of the scale, the whales, was just, it was a dead end. It was gonna all go. They must have understood this. There was enough of the new sciences to understand this, but it's probably easier from our perspective to see that it was a very dangerous thing to do for the whales, but for ecology generally, and yet they carried on, until they were actually stopped. But in our own century, or in the last century, our century, if you like. So it's an interesting concept. I mean, I understand they didn't know what they were doing, sort of thing, but there comes a point when they really did know what they were doing. They really did know what they were doing, and it was just too lucrative to stop. Just like big oil.
Yeah, that sense of the limitless frontier or the endless frontier that they had, when it took 3 weeks to cross the Atlantic, and now the space station, loops the Earth in an hour and a half or so. And we're chatting with the guys in Australia and all around the world here. It doesn't seem limitless anymore. We can grasp the whole Earth at this point.
Yeah. And the big oil thing is just
You said you were going to go.
the big oil thing is, I know it's that time of day. The big oil thing is just the whales of our time. We are then the big oil. The big oil are the whales. The whales are the big oil now, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2 million whales that were killed in the 19th century, 3 million whales that were killed in the 20th century. Our new unlimited frontier is this digital frontier. It certainly feels unlimited and endless right now, where we could go digitally, the human race, what we can get done, what we can accomplish in this digital format feels limitless to me now. But the physical Earth, the physical resources don't seem limitless to me. We know the 3 trillion trees are not enough. They're not limitless. As a matter of fact, they're not enough. We need to replace, repair, reforest. We got to get back to the 6 trillion trees. So we've managed to kill 5 million whales and cut down 3 trillion trees. That's not good housekeeping. That's not taking care of this planet. And the planet will rearrange herself, regardless of us or the land. She will just straighten things out. And here we are learning and making progress. Big oil's just living in the 19th century, and there are questions of justice, questions of equality. I have a hard time with racism myself. I suppose I am half Greek, and I did grow up in New York City with the entire world of people in the big city, you know. There are some people who are emotionally racist. That is, they just don't like somebody else who's different. They just have an emotional reaction to them. There are some who use racism for profit. And there are all the reasons that really don't matter. And racism and hatred, that's part of the just transition. I don't think we're going to get to any green new world, any green solar punk, indigenous futurism. I don't think we're going to get there as the United States, as a successful civilization, without a just transition. I don't think we're going to have super green capitalism. I just don't think it's possible. They're extracting like there's no tomorrow. They killed all the whales. They chopped down all the trees. They're not going to suddenly learn to stop extracting like madmen. That's too much to ask. I don't see it. They can transition to green neoliberalism.
Yeah, but if big oil is the big whale in the room, and it's like the big elephant in the room, they do have to be stopped, because they won't just kill, the big whale. They will kill everyone. They will go on doing it until they reach a point where everybody is on a slippery slope to nowhere, really, and they will keep doing it. And so they are, they are the big whale in the room.
Yeah, and whaling itself, whale oil, the demand for whale products in time simply declined, replaced by electric lights and other such things. The whatever the commercial uses of all those whales were, the whale oil, there was no more demand for whale products. The same thing will happen to petroleum. It already is. Last year, 2023, globally, 30% of the world's electricity was created by non-fossil fuel energy. And that number will only keep increasing. Our guy, Peter Baisley, here in town, he pointed out, Oliver, each barrel of oil takes another barrel of oil to produce it. So every solar panel and wind turbine and all that gets added into the system, that reduction of petroleum becomes exponential. It'll start declining. The less that has to be shipped around the world. 40% of all shipping is to ship fossil fuels. So as all the distribution and creation of fossil fuels lessen, they will be using less fossil fuels to make all that stuff. It'll all become an exponential effort. And
so, are we gonna help this this big oil whale, which is getting slowly stranded on the beach? Are we going to help it back into the sea by allowing them to bullshit their way back into the sea, or are we just going to walk away from it and let it die?
I'm a hard liner. You know me. I'm a hard liner. I'm not nice. I'm a throw them overboard, Malcolm X kind of guy. When the shit hits the fan, when it's a crisis, toss them overboard. I'm not very sentimental, and some of that might be Greek. I don't know. But I do know that the animal that's dying, the industry that's dying, Oliver, if you look up dying industry, there is no research on that term whatsoever. They don't put money into that research. They don't
No,
want to
they
know
don't.
about it. And there's only a limited amount of petroleum on the ground. As I just said, the non-fossil fuel electricity is coming on rapidly. Their days are numbered. They won't face facts yet. But it really doesn't matter if environmentalists all went on vacation and the indigenous peoples forgot or moved on to something else or whatever. If we all forgot about them, their days are numbered anyway. They can sell all the oil they want. We can get to 5-6 degrees centigrade above the baseline. They're doomed. This path will not work.
Yeah.
And
Let's leave them on the beach. Then.
yeah.
Yep.
So we're trying to take a more efficient course than just leaving them to their own devices and killing 6 billion people. We're trying to find better paths, the end of the USA and that kind of thing. Going South wrote Big Oil Sleeping with the Fishes. So that's pretty good. But they are very, very wealthy. This $13 trillion a year industry, and they're addicted to profits, and they don't see the writing on the wall yet. Some of our task is to help them see the truth. That's all. Just make that truth clear to them. Like, yo, this is reality. Here's the truth. Look at it. Because the truth does set you free. And as Lost Sue said the other day, you just can't go on a journey without the truth. So we want that big oil company, those companies, to go on their journey, and they can't do it without the truth. It's simple. We've got to see it as simple. We can't be overwhelmed. We can't. And we can say good morning to Green Kraut over there in Eastern Australia, who's having his coffee, waking up, listening to our conversation, and repairing bikes. Bicycles are always an answer. The most efficient way we know of to travel in terms of making carbon dioxide per mile or kilometer. And I've been enjoying hearing Earthpunk. Thanks, Earthpunk. Lots of good contributions. What are you thinking of now?
I just wanted to. It's out from that. Maybe 1 decade if we're lucky. But I also wanted to say that I wonder if this idea that industrialization has drastically improved life for a great number of people might be a myth. Because while it has certainly allowed for us to reproduce excessively to the point where we are now wondering if we're overpopulated, I don't know that it ever really improved a greater number of lives than it extracted or detracted from. And I think that evidence of this can be found in Teddy Roosevelt, who even back when he was president in the 1900s, he knew that we were in great need of conservation efforts. And this was, right around the time that the Industrial Revolution was even getting started. So he was able to recognize even back then, even prior to, the automobile and the great rise of the fossil fuel industry, that we were already doing a great deal of damage to the natural habitat of the United States of America. And his conservation efforts were focused on the preservation of natural lands and animals. But even back then, before you could really see the effects of what we would now call industrialization, there was a huge impact that was being levied against basically everyone. So was life really at any point genuinely better for a greater number of people and just lives in a general sense than otherwise? And I don't know if we can say that's true, because even at the beginning of American industrialization with Henry Ford, it can be argued that he was the extractor, and he didn't necessarily make the lives of the people who were employees better. He basically turned everyone into slave laborers for slave wages. And then we know all about how he used that to further anti-Semitic ideals and anti-neurodivergent ideas, to include, he basically supported purging the neurodivergent peoples, which would have been me and others in this group. So I don't know that we can say industrialization ever genuinely helped anyone except for those people who were willing to profit. And I'm pretty sure that the indigenous peoples of America had already figured out a sort of just solution for how to interact with products and people.
Yeah, thanks, Earthpunk, for bringing up the neurodiversity issue. That's been on my mind a lot lately. We often chat with Jennifer, a neurodiversity activist, and it does seem to be a very important topic for all of us to remember: neurodiversity and neurotypical, accepting that some people's minds and brains work differently.
Well said, Tom.
Yeah. And we need to not project and accept all that. It's complicated stuff, but very, very interesting. And then these historical questions, world history. As one of the people said in this morning's space, I think, about unknown history and silent history. Books. So world history is getting a major overhaul right now, a major new ways of thinking about history and how we slice the problems and how we cake slice the problems and the issues and the way we look at history is rapidly changing.
Hey, thank you. Yes, I'm having my coffee. I've been listening for hours already. But yeah, no, the brain is caffeinated enough, I think. Yeah, it will be interesting what fossil fuel industry will do. Like, if you think about, like, they have boardroom meetings and so on, they must be thinking about, like, our business case will be fading. What do we gonna do? So we see them pivoting towards hydrogen and dreaming of green hydrogen and so on. And yeah, I find it really interesting, and I want to share an example with you from Western Australia, the city of Esperance, a beautiful spot, a little bit hard to reach because it's so remote. So they decided a while ago to get off gas. And they are making good progress there now. And it's interesting because if you think about, like, what kind of power you can have as a community. Yeah, and what kind of sign and message you will send with that. So that you get involved in local politics and get people inspired, talk to people. Yeah, you don't need to call yourself a politician to act like one or as an activist. I just have a friend going into council with the Green Party here. He prepared all his campaign and had all his flyers printed and so on, and went to our local market and every event and spread the word about what he will stand up for. And in the end, he won prior the election because nobody opposed him. Sometimes life can be that easy. So I found that really funny. So we had some drinks on to celebrate his early win in brackets last week. But yeah, and we have another Greens candidate for our council, so we hopefully going to end up with 2 Green councillors on our council. So that will be highly beneficial to also push for what I like to achieve with regards to mobility, not just bikes, but also having safe walking infrastructure and ideally getting a subscription-based community bus, because we have like big buses with a capacity of 50 plus driving around empty because they run only twice a day. Or yeah, and then some overland ones which are also like usually 80+% empty. But if we would have like a community bus subscription based, people can sign up to it, and it works like a big taxi like they have in South Africa, for example, or these mini buses cruising around. Yeah, you just wave your hand and they pull over and yeah, give you a ride. I think that's also possible in a small country town in Victoria. Why not? And if you give people with that subscription a backup voucher for the local taxi operator, yeah, that they have a plan B if they need it, I think that will make it even more attractive. Yeah, that's my 50 cents for today, or 20. And yeah, always great to be a part of this. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And I hope the bicycle repairs are going well. We got to keep those
Man,
bicycles on the road.
I haven't signed the lease yet, but I have a handshake on it, so I'll get a 43 square meter commercial shop, and that's the timeline is 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks, I want to be able to get going. And
Outstanding.
yeah, pretty exciting. Thank you.
It really is good. I mean, bicycles, I'm 60 years old, so I haven't been on a bicycle for a while, but I loved biking in New York City when I was a kid. Nothing in the world like bicycling in the snow in New York City. I mean, that's really living. And we could go, it was the fastest way to travel to New York City. You go right by all the cars, you go faster than the subways and the buses. It was the fastest way around town. We just loved our bicycles. Yeah, you get hit by taxis constantly. Go straight into a taxi door and go right over it. I had my tire fixed once. I went around the corner and a taxi drove over the same tire as I was cornering, and I had to go right back to the store and get the tire fixed. And I think I think we'll end the space at 1/2 past in 10 minutes. 6.5 hours should be enough time for us to discuss for the week. And I'm sure Oliver would say, and Kim and Paul and Wilson and everyone, how happy they are with the progress of the Climate Crisis Club. We have a website, thanks to Janet. And see how she's doing. She went to a wedding last week. And how was the wedding? Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi. How are
Yeah,
you?
thanks, Yves. Yeah, I'm wanted to thank you to yeah, I was listening a long time, but was late today because I was on a demonstration to film it. And they were dependent on Putin. And yeah, they slacked it off. Also Habeck did it. And the economy is also less companies closing than he's the Green Minister of Economics and Climate. And yeah, I think it's going well and going off. Phasing out fossils, I think it's still important, and yeah, how much more cities do it, and also go for the buildings to put solar panels on it, and because you can do it on several levels to guide in this direction. And I think it's going in the right direction at the moment, but protest is still necessary because it's not going as quick as it's supposed to be.
Awesome. I was saying I saw The Zone of Interest last night. An outstanding movie. It won the Academy Award for Foreign Picture. And a movie about a difficult period in German history. And one of the touching moments for me this year was, as an American, we talk with Canadians, we talk with the English, we talk with the Australians. Our traditional alliance is Jennifer and Eva and Green there. It really feels like the modern German nation has joined us as allies. That feeling of allies, to the true friends.
Oh, I mean, I think it's great. I think we've got a wonderful community here, and it looks like it just keeps growing.
It keeps growing, man. It's like gardening. It's like, we've laid out the garden. We're doing some harvesting. We're planting some new crops. The whole thing's an organic process. It will keep growing, Wilson, and we'll keep finding. From the guy in Western Australia today. He's another smart, mad genius type guy. And it will keep growing, especially if we don't start infighting, and which we're doing really good on lately. The political issues often get us started. Shall we take some final words here?
Started by thanking everyone for being here, and I just want to reiterate that I truly believe, and honestly, you're always going to have some counter person in I talk about organizing, and when people hear the word organizing, they imagine being the guy on the bullhorn talking to a group of people marching down the street. And that's way more than organizing is. Like, this space, this meeting is organizing. Working with people to build a website to attract more people, that's organizing. And fundamental to organizing is building a community. And at the end of the day, if you're really interested and committed to building that community to be more effective, you have to be all of us working together to achieve that goal. And, people are at different stages in their life. You can tell someone the truth, you can tell them what's going to happen to their face. And if they're not ready to accept that, it kind of bounces off of them. But sometimes you can say something and plant an idea. And when the time is ready for that person to step into that and use that knowledge, they'll utilize it. So I just want to thank Alex for holding this space. Thank everyone here today for contributing, to listening, to caring. Because, you can come here and you pick up one new piece of information and say, hey, I didn't know about that. And then you go and you do your own research and you develop your own knowledge. And then later on, you meet someone else and they mention, say, hey, I know about something related to that. And then you can connect people. Even something as simple as networking like that is a form of organizing. And so, like I said, I'm really grateful for all the work being done here today. It's great things, and just keep it up.
Thank you so much. And we are actually an actual club. We have 126 people in the club right now and 27 nations or so. It's all so true to stay organized, keep organizing, and it just keeps going on, and only good things can happen. Anyone else today wanna? Wilson, you got some final words for us? You always got some words.
Well, I just want everybody to take care and have a good week. Continue with your individual contributions, right? Continue the good fight of Earth justice. And I think that's about it.
Was that the whipped cream, man? What was that?
I have no idea.
My toothbrush, sorry.
That's an interesting toothbrush.
Very good. Well, she's German, German.
That's a first. That's a first.
That is a first. That's awesome. And it's wonderful to hear from some younger voices. We're hearing from a lot of younger voices today, which is so important. What Carl Sagan said. They're the four generations right now, really: Boomers, Gen X, Millennials, and Zoomers. So it's good to hear from everyone. And I have great confidence that we will succeed. Get a lot of this racism out of the house. Get a lot of these environmental initiatives done and passed, and really see a much better place with a much better life. Once we can envision it, then we can envision the path to there, and we're getting it done. Let's bring up Sky Kiss and have a few words from Sky Kiss in Colorado. Hi, Sky Kiss. How's it going?
We're about to end. Thank you. I'm learning how to listen to two spaces at one time.
Well, how does
really
that work?
fun.
How does that work? I just can't do that. I want.
One goes in one ear and the other goes in the other ear. And well, it's multitasking on steroids. So yeah, because we were talking about being racist, like with all the immigrant pressure on all the European countries. And a lot of the immigrant pressure is not Ukrainians. Ukrainians are part of that, but a lot of it is Russia doing all these things and sowing disinformation and sending floods of immigrants across borders. And then, it impacts the territorial defense of several of the countries throughout, all the way from Finland down into the UK. And so they were talking about that, and they were talking about housing, and just how to handle all the new people, and how to think about these things. So and we're dealing with that in Deidre's disinformation channels, and also other disinformation spaces and such. So, and some of this, it all gets woven together. I mean, we're talking about environmental concerns in all of those places, and also in the Ukrainian spaces. We talk about environmental concerns and environmental pressure, and flora and fauna, the whole thing. So I wanted to remind everybody of, while we're getting ready for our first snow, not here in at 6,000 feet, but up in the 14,000 feet in Colorado, they're going to see their first snow up there. So Bella's getting ready. My friend Bella from various spaces. And her dogs love the snow. So as long as they get some, I don't think it'll be much, But I'm always happy when the Rockies get snow because there are glaciers up there. And those glaciers have been really suffering from the climate change, in recent years. And that's where much of the water comes from in the Colorado River, and California gets some of that, and some of the other western states. So it's one of the places on the planet that's been really impacted by climate change. And we've lost a lot of our forests due to the warming climate, because the beetles don't get killed, and so the plants, the trees, certain pine trees, get overrun by the insects, and so it's all out of balance. And it's been that way for about 25 years. So it's just one of those things that you have to look at. So forest management is important, but not raking the floors. Raking the floors is not a thing. So please tell your MAGA friends and family, raking the floors is not really a thing. Clearing brush around your house, maybe. That might prevent your house from catching fire if the forest near your home catch fire. Okay, there are things you are supposed to do, and there are things that are just made up nonsense by a kooky person. Okay, and the other thing I wanted to remind everybody: when you put links up in the nest, if you don't put them in the comments, they will not be seen by anybody who later on wants to listen to the space and go to the links that everybody shares in the space. If they're just in the nest, they will not be seen. They will not be followed. And so the message you want to send will be not as strong as if you also put them in what some people call the purple pill down at the right-hand corner on the bottom of your screen. And that is where you put the comments. Thank you very much. Great space. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you guys for co-hosting, Wilson and
Absolutely.
Lasu.
Though I'm not sure, I think Lasu has been taking his nap, for a while here, which is good. He needs to get his rest. I think he was up all night. Skykiss is completely up to date on the news out of Ukraine, the NAFO situation, and what's going on, and she pays attention to our climate world here. I will ask Oliver then to lead us out of this meeting. What you got, Ollie?
Oh, not much tonight. I think we've covered everything. It seems to have been an awe-inspiring space today.